too many. Hold on 1 second. Just gave me a weird error.
Yeah, no
The
problem.
path to business success is often unpredictable. Managing your banking.
Weird error.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Okay. Looks like we're live chat. And I need to send you a link to the video, by the way. I could send that over.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So you can.
Oh, cool. All right. Oh, good. Yeah, I'll put it in my. I'll let everyone know here on my Discord. I don't think anyone knows I'm doing this. Let's see.
Chat. Let me know if y'all can hear both of us clearly.
Yeah, 1 2 1 2.
Check, check, mic check.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't know why. You're right. I'm looking at the picture now. Why do I look so blurry? I wonder. I'm sorry about that, audience.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Like, this is blurrier than usual. I don't know why that would be.
Yeah,
My speed tests are good.
Yeah, they said we sound good.
Yeah, that's all I care about. But
yeah, that's the most
important. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's no problem. All right, so first, everybody knows who Colin Moriarty is, Last Stand Media, founder and CEO, Sacred Symbols falls under that, as well as Defining Duke and, the several other shows that you do on your channel. So the reason I wanted to do this interview is because I think, you could provide some insight, based on your experience, in the gaming industry. And I think you have, interesting perspectives on a lot of shit. And I'm very opinionated, right? Especially on Twitter. A lot of people kind of hate me for it. A lot of people love me for it, but a lot of people hate me for it, right? So, and I argue with my podcast members about like gaming topics all the fucking time. Like our podcast is like hours of us just arguing about different topics because we see things, very differently. So a lot of the stuff I'm gonna just, talk about and ask you is stuff we argue about, and the stuff I put on Twitter that a lot of people disagree with me about and consider to be hot takes. So, I'm really just interested in your perspective on things. And thank you for coming.
I appreciate. Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm rarely invited on podcasts, so I'm happy to do it, and it's always fun to talk about games with new communities and different communities. Although, like you said, we probably have a lot of crossover between our communities as well. So, but yeah, no, it's good to talk about games. I always love to do so.
Yeah. Real quick before we get into it, want to give a shout out to Cog. He's a co-host on Defining Duke. I've known Cog for, I think I met Cog at like on the train while I was going to E3 like 10 years ago or some shit like that. And he helped me, he told me, how to get in contact with you, to contact, Dustin. Shout out to Dustin. And then, shout out to your fiance, Micah. She's been helpful coordinating this whole thing. So shout out to all of them when helping this.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. They're great.
Mm-hmm.
We're very happy to do it. And yeah, shout out to Cog. I just saw him in Texas a couple of weeks ago, and we had a really good time, and it was good to nerd out with him a little bit. We don't get to see each other in person very often, so it's nice to do that.
Yeah. So before we get into games, I got to ask you, get a little bit into sports, because I know you're a Jets fan.
Yeah. Yeah, I am.
I'm from New York, but I'm an Eagles fan. I know that shit sounds crazy, right? I know it's like blasphemy. Damn,
where are you from in New York?
Brooklyn.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. I gotta ask you, what are you thinking about the Jets? Because it's crazy. Because yesterday I was like, yeah, I'm gonna ask you, what do you think about Derek Carr possibly coming to the Jets? But he just signed with the Saints. Now,
yeah, I saw that.
Now people are considering Aaron Rodgers. I'm looking at that like that might be another Brett Favre situation for y'all. Even though I consider Aaron Rodgers to be far better than Brett Favre, especially at this point in his career. But what are you thinking? Like as far as your Jets go, and because I think y'all are missing a few pieces. But y'all are actually, I think y'all are really a good quarterback away from being a real playoff team.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I mean, I've been it's kind of funny because I often float things like float ideas, or wouldn't it be awesome to have this player, or wouldn't this be awesome to have this player? And I've been kind of trying to manifest this for, about a year or so. It seemed like he was on the outs, like he'd play this game. Aaron Rodgers would play this game with Green Bay, where it's like, am I going to be back? Am I not going to be back? What's going to happen? And I think they just got tired of it. They have Jordan Love. And so the timing's right. And I love the echo of Brett Favre specifically because that was actually a really good year for us. It was, he got hurt at 8-3, I think, or 9-3 maybe. And then the rest of the season got out of hand. And that's when we drafted Sanchez the next year. But we've been quarterback hungry ever since. I would take 2 solid years with Rodgers over an infinite amount of time with Derek Carr, who's never won a playoff game. I had no interest in him at all anyway. And I'm of the mind that if we don't get Rodgers, we should really just stick with Mike White and let him go into camp as, the guy. He hasn't gotten any preparation. He was kind of pulled in and out of the lineup, and we don't really know what he's capable of. So it seems like Aaron Rodgers is going to be the guy. They're out there right now apparently talking to him. So
right
in California.
Because I just don't know how much years, out of Rodgers y'all are going to have left. 2, maybe, 3. I don't know. He could be a good stopgap till y'all find, the long-term answer. So
definitely, that's the hope. I wouldn't expect more than 2. I think 3 would be awesome, and it totally worth a first-round pick or whatever it's going to require, first and second. And the Packers will have to eat a bunch of the money, which is great too. But I don't have, and I agree. And then I would love to sign Mike White. He's going to be a free agent, I think restricted, but he will be a free agent. And then there's no reason to get rid of Zach Wilson. So because we already have to pay him for 2 more years anyway. So just let them sit and learn and figure it out later. Who the hell knows what things look like? But you're right. If we had average quarterback play, we would have easily been a playoff team last year. There's no doubt about it. And I watched every minute of every game. It was both exhilarating and heartbreaking, depending on when you're talking about.
Yeah. When's the last time y'all been to the playoffs? I honestly
2010. It was the 2010 season. It was we beat who was it? We beat
was that with Sanchez?
It was like the Colts in the first round. Yeah, it was Sanchez, and then we beat the Patriots in the second. Oh no, yeah, it was the Patriots in the second round. That was the last time we won a playoff game. It was in New England. That was the last playoff berth. We had a flirtation with the playoffs in 2015 when the good Fitzpatrick, like the Fitzmagic year.
Yeah.
We were 10-6, but missed the playoffs as a wild card, which was infuriating. But it would be nice to. And I thought this was going to be the year. In fact, we were 5-2, 6-3.
I remember.
I'm like, you just got to win a few more games, and we'll just make it. I don't even care what happens. And that was but when we made it in 2009 and 2010, especially Sanchez's rookie season, I was like, this is house money. Who gives a shit, really? And I'd feel the same way now. It's just been so long. It's sad, but that's what I want. I would rather have a first round blowout than another wild card weekend without the Jets. So,
hey man, I wish y'all the best in the upcoming years. Y'all could do it. I believe in y'all.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I will hope the same. I appreciate it. We're a hungry fan base, and we're a passionate and loyal fan base. And I would love, Aaron Rodgers has the blessing to wear Namath's 12, and it seems like it all might work out. And he could be I think he understands in his head he didn't win as many as he could have in Green Bay, and he will become an instant hero, like the most important Jet ever if he won a Super Bowl. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I wanted to ask you a question about, the business with Last Stand Media and everything like that. And so everybody, I think a lot of people are familiar with your situation, after you left Kind of Funny, right? Because of the joke, people blew out of proportion and everything like that.
Right.
And let me just say, my podcast, we say like 30 inappropriate things, like 10 times worse than that per podcast, right? Like it's way worse. Like my chat will tell you, like we should be, if we're not big enough to be, I guess, canceled, but if the right eyes got, listen to our podcast, they would get us the fuck out of here. So I wanted to ask you, is there any like fear or concern you have with like, let's say your podcast grew a substantial amount. Let's say you were getting, I don't know, random number, like 500K views per episode or something like that. Would you be concerned or have any fear that you have that much eyes on you? Of course, you came from IGN and like, all these other big platforms, but is there any fear or concern that comes with that you're worried about
Not
because of what
really.
happened?
Yeah, not really. I mean, it's an interesting question, but not particularly, because like you say on our show too, that was what was so ironic about it was I had said many, 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 many more offensive things before that, after that, yesterday. It was just kind of an opportunism and a time and place thing that I think people had to kind of be there to understand. But I think that our off the cuff kind of inappropriate nature is part of the magic. And I often said it actually at our live show in Houston. I said it to the audience at the end, like there are a million subscriber YouTube channels that would trade the economic realities of our companies any day. We don't really chase the views. We want customers and subscribers. And I think part of that reality is being yourself, being candid, not being canned. And I think those things are really important. So we don't really have a product without that. So you kind of have to walk that line, but we have good partners, I think, in Patreon, which we've had for years. And our representatives, like our ad guys, and then our audience understands. And when people say things that might go over the line or might be inappropriate or misconstrued, I think that they know not to come after us, because I think they know it's not done with ill intent. But for me, I'm much more worried about like the Patreon numbers and the happiness of the Patreon subscriber base, and they like the product the way it is, so we kind of lean into that.
Okay. Yeah, because I think like with my podcast, we've our numbers have been steadily increasing randomly, like over the last 6 months. I have no idea, honestly, why. But like, yeah, we say so much just offensive shit, but I think it's because we say offensive things about everybody, like even about ourselves. So I think it's like like my audience knows it's well rounded. We'll make fun of ourselves, anybody from any race, creed, religion, whatever, right? So I think that's kind of like what helps us get away with it a little bit is, we make fun of everybody. So, but yeah, I was just curious, if you had any worry about that, but it's good that you don't.
No, I don't. I mean, it's a great question, but I just can't worry about that. I think being myself, like leaning into being myself, has been a huge boon to my career, and it's a niche product, but it's not. I don't know that it's even made for more than like we're the biggest PlayStation podcast in the world, but that's a modest thing compared to other podcasts and either other gaming podcasts. But I don't even know like what the ceiling is for the kind of podcast we do anyway. Like I don't know if it could ever even have 500,000 listeners a week. Like, I don't even know if that's possible. I don't think it's like that intriguing to that many people. I wish it was, but part of that magic is finding the micro community and being able to make a career out of it. And I had the biggest audience of my life at IGN, but it was the least amount of money I made. Like you have to kind of balance those things and the realities of your business and your life and all of that too, to make sure it's working out for you. So yeah, we're true to ourselves, and we hope that shines through in the content.
Okay. Want to ask you something about games journalism and journalists. I mean, people have a lot of criticism about game journalism, especially now. But one thing I'm curious about is, do you think, in your experience, have you seen game journalists afraid in any manner to really, really criticize games bluntly? Like, for example, right? Ryan McCaffrey, right? Which this is not shitting on Ryan McCaffrey at all. I think, I really like Ryan McCaffrey. But a lot of people didn't have, Suicide Squad didn't have a lot of, good reception. A lot of people were disappointed. And Ryan McCaffrey, just on Twitter, he said a few tweets that in a roundabout way, kind of beating around the bush, that the game looked fucking bad to him, right? But he said it in a way like he wasn't trying to offend anybody, and he didn't want to just flat out say that to him it looked bad. And I think a lot of people get that sentiment from different, people in game journalism, that they're trying not to offend developers, publishers, these companies, because they are in, I guess, somewhat proximity to them. So they kind of want to watch what they say and how they say it. Is that a thing that you're like aware of, that people might like kind of, soften the blow of how they really think because they're in the industry?
Yeah, I think I don't know that it actively happens, but I think it passively happens. And I can say that in retrospect, it probably passively happened to me too. If you sit down across from someone at dinner one day at GDC, and then a few months later their game comes out and it's not very good, you're not going to be dishonest about that. Or at least that was my situation. But you might want to not be so mean about it because there is like a person on the other end of it. And that's certainly something that I've thought about in my own career back when I did games journalism as well. And we tried to erase those even perceptions of incredulity, I guess, as it were, with like, for instance, I didn't cover Insomniac after a while. I didn't cover certain studios that I was covering because I was writing huge stories about them and exposés. I was invited into Naughty Dog to do the history of Naughty Dog with them, 50,000 word piece. I saw a bunch of things that I was not supposed to see or was seeing really early, including Uncharted 4 and other things. And so you kind of have to remove yourself from even having this conflict of interest or this perception. And I think what a lot of people in the industry don't do is that they don't reflect enough and realize that the perception is that it comes off a little cabalish, that they're all very friendly with each other and they're all having dinner and hanging out. And I can see that perception. But what I can say in my own honest opinion, or my own honest experience, it's not even an opinion, is that I didn't see anyone blatantly doing anything that would be untoward. I did see people just kind of trying to, sharpen or, flatten an edge a little bit and make it so it wasn't so sharp. And that's kind of like necessary if you need access. And it's funny you brought up Ryan McCaffrey, who's a good friend of mine from back in the day and still to this day. And I would actually not be so upset with him because the virtue of his job as previews editor at IGN and the guy who basically sees games early is to have an open mind. And it's important that he's looked at that way and that it really comes off that way, because people are not going to invite him in to see games 18 months early anymore or 12 months early. And that's not an insult to him. That's being fair. I think that if what you saw was Ryan when the game came out and pulling punches, that's different. But I think pulling punches in the preview environment is okay. We don't really have the full picture of it. And it's not quite as, I don't even know. It's not quite as sinister as I think people probably think it is. But it's also true that games journalism doesn't have any power anymore. And we avoid this entire thing at Last Stand by just not dealing with, especially with sacred symbols. We don't accept any early games, any codes, any access, no previews, no invites, no events, nothing. We buy all of our own content. We buy all of our games, buy all of our hardware, which is why all of our shit is so late. We just talked about PSVR2 this past week.
Yeah,
we just recorded our Dead Space remake spoiler cast, but that's by virtue of making sure that we don't even, and the audience can't possibly think we're on the take, because we are not only so adversarial to the industry, but like the industry wants nothing to do with us anyway. So that's the best pocket to be in, and then no one will ask any questions about it, which I prefer. And I can understand, by the way, why people ask questions when you have that kind of contact and that kind of, I could get any game for free I wanted at any time, when I was at IGN. It wasn't a big deal at all. I could ask for 10 copies of that game. I get it. It does look weird, but unfortunately, I wasn't. A lot of people in that situation aren't smart enough to take advantage of it anyway.
Yeah, I'll give like game journalists. Like I'm not as hard on game journalists as what I see of how other people are. Like people think game journalists, like everybody is like taking money, when we know that doesn't actually happen. There's always that notion out there that, they're taking money from underneath the table and they're paid off. I don't believe none of that shit. Right. But I want to give them credit, because I do think they have a good amount of self-control, because I know myself, I'm quick to call a game trash. Like I'm very fucking quick, and everybody knows it. Like I have if I don't like a game in the first hour and a half or 2 hours, I'm dropping it. And I'm done with it. Right. I have very little patience. A game has to get going, pretty quick for me. And yeah, I'll just trash a game pretty quickly. And I think it's because I'm 33, and I feel like since I've been playing games for so long, since like maybe 5 years old or some shit, I know exactly what I like. So I honestly feel sometimes people tell me to broaden my horizon when it comes to games and, be open-minded. But I feel like since I've been playing games for so long, I know exactly what I'm going to like and not like. There are some games that, that I thought were going to be bad that surprised me, but that's very seldom. Like Guardians of the Galaxy for example, right? I thought that game was going to be terrible. I think that game is fucking great, right? And I think that was partly on bad advertising and how they marketed the game. So I want to ask you, do you think like trying out new games that you typically wouldn't be into, because people like try to like shame you for not being into shit that you wouldn't normally try and you don't want to. Don't you think it's a little bit overrated to just be open-minded and to play a whole bunch of random shit? Like I don't really feel the need to do that, and people try to get on me for that.
Yeah, I think it's what you said. Like eventually, you know what you like, and there are certain games. There's actually jokes in our audience where people always want me to play like CRPGs and these like deep like Divinity and all these games. And I'm like, I don't want to play them. I don't care. I don't like them. And people just they want you to play what they want to play, and they want to see that reflected. And I think knowing your taste and then maybe being as broad as you possibly can in and understanding the parameters of that taste. So an example is I love third-person shooters, and I love shooters generally. I think they're awesome. But that game Evil West came out late last year, and it was like a little bit budget looking and all that. I didn't really know. I like vampires. I'm really into Castlevania and all that, so I bought it, and I ended up really, really loving it and really, really evangelizing it. That game really could have slipped by me, and I always think there are probably 10 of those for every one of them that actually slipped by me. And in fact, there are probably just too many games that I would want to play. So for me, like, I don't need to, it's very much like you're saying, I don't need to go and play the biggest thing. Like an example is Gran Turismo. Not a racing guy. Don't care. We try to cover it fairly. We have people that are really good on it and knowledgeable about it on our show to talk about it on Sacred Symbols Plus, but it's not for me. I'm not going to try to fit that in. So it's good to be open-minded, but I know what I like. I like role-playing games. I like action games. I like shooters. I like, I don't like adventure games. I don't like games with lots of puzzles. I don't like, I know. So it's exactly what you say when people say to me, Colin, you'd really like, you should play Portal. I'm like, dude, I'm too stupid for Portal. I'm too stupid for that game. I don't know what you want me to say. Like, I know that I don't like those kinds of games. I know I'm going to be bad at them. And anything like that, I know I'm not going to like too. So I totally appreciate what you're saying. I think the important thing is to not be closed-minded, but to understand. And I'm always surprised when games kind of find their way in to this gate I put around myself. And it happens every so often where I'm like, wow, I'm really surprised that I like this, or I'm really surprised that I don't like this. And so you got to play. The important thing, and we say this all the time, especially because we don't have to deal with embargoes, we don't get codes, we buy our games. I always say, just to my whole company, play whatever you want. Just play whatever you want. I don't care. I'm playing Wild Arms 2 right now. That game came out when I was in 11th grade. It has no relevance whatsoever or bearing on our content, and no one cares about it today. But I want to play it, so I'm playing it. And that's what we got to do, is play what we want to play.
Since you bring up Wild Arms 2, that brings me to another question. I interact with some people that they look at retro games as pieces of art that should never be tampered with, should never be touched, should never be even improved, remastered, remade. Don't touch it. I think the most recent conversation I had was regarding because there's been Metal Gear remakes rumors swirling around and all that shit. And some people say, no, Metal Gear 1 is a masterpiece. It doesn't need to be remade. You don't need to touch it. Leave it alone. And I don't understand that, because it's like, if, let's say, Metal Gear gets remade, the original Metal Gear is still right fucking there. Nothing happens to it, right? So I don't understand these group of people who act like you're ruining their experience because you're remaking a game. Like you're ruining the lineage of the game or the legacy of the game because it gets remade. And I think most games that get remade now are pretty good. We don't often get bad remakes anymore, at least. So do you have any like thoughts on these people who are like, don't touch anything, everything is perfect how it was and all this?
No, I actually agree with you completely. It's funny, Metal Gear Solid's an interesting point. It is an interesting game because it was remade on the GameCube, but it happened so quickly that it was too fast. And I had it, and it was, Silicon Knights and all that, but like, I think it's not, in other words, let's back up. We shouldn't ask ourselves, should these remakes exist or remasters or whatever. As long as a game is available in some sense, to play or access in its original form, I think that's totally fine to play around with things in the future. But we have to ask ourselves questions like with this rumored Horizon Zero Dawn remaster or remake that apparently is going to come to PS5.
Unfortunately.
We have to ask ourselves, yeah, right, exactly. It's too soon. And Horizon's already beautiful. I don't think so we have to ask ourselves about the intent. But if the intent is let's get this obscure game off of old hardware, it's not very accessible right now, it's in 4:3, we can make it in 16:9, we can up-res it, make it run at 60 frames, like that's positive in my opinion. So I think a lot of this goes to accessibility, and what I think Xbox gets so right is this notion that there's just this forever platform, right? And you can just put discs in from 15 or 20 years ago and they're going to actually work. They're going to not maybe run off the disc, but they're going to read something off Xbox Live and you're going to be in this game. And the idea of this forever game, which I think PlayStation's kind of in the middle of figuring out and Nintendo just doesn't get at all, is cool. Having a platform where you don't even have to worry about this. You don't need to remake the original Halo. The original Halo is available on your hardware right now. And I think that's another thing that you kind of have to take into account too. So I'm not personally against them because I love playing these new games, especially these re-release games. I went back and platinumed, the original Wild Arms last year, and even some of the remasters and kind of straight up remakes. Like I really enjoyed this past break playing Crisis Core again, and I thought that was a really welcome game. I played through Uncharted 4 recently again on PS5, and that was a really welcome game. So I don't want to be hypocritical and say I don't want these things. I just think that there needs to be some sort of intention behind it. And if the intention is just to make it again, then I think that's irrelevant. For instance, with Zero Dawn, that's available inherently on PS5. It doesn't need anything. And so maybe use those resources on something else.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Do the remakes where it makes sense, and like something like Metal Gear that came out so long ago, even though it was remade on the GameCube, it's not something that's we can consider modern. So I definitely agree with that.
I'm sorry, I was just gonna say that's the point. Is like that was just so quick. It was 3 years later, right, or 4 years later. It's so silly. It's like if you go back and read some back when SquareSoft was still SquareSoft, they were talking about remaking Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 on PS2. There was just this weird mentality. It's like that's so, and they realized that was stupid. So it is that distance. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, no. Thank you for that answer. Wanted to ask you this is one of the things me and at least one of my podcast members and my audience argue about a lot. And I still don't fucking believe them. I think they're full of shit. It's about the importance of music in video games. Modern video. I should specify modern video games. I think music, right, was important in the earlier generations, right? I don't think music is really that important now, and I don't think it it's exceptional, like it stands out. Like back in the day, games had soundtracks where I don't even need to see the game. If you play the music, I know exactly where it comes from. So it was unique music, it was exceptional, it stood out. Now, I don't really think music in games is that important, right? Sometimes I'll be honest with you, I put certain games like on fucking mute and listen to podcasts. Of course, not like story-driven games where I need to hear the story, but certain games I just put it on mute and listen to podcasts, right? So, and everybody tells me music is extremely important in games, but I asked them, okay, if you had to rank it, are you going to put it? I don't believe that you're going to put music above gameplay, graphics, story, even like the technical things. I don't believe that. Some people say they would put music above graphics and even story, but I just think they're full of shit. I just don't believe them.
That's crazy.
So I just wanted to ask you, okay, where would you rank music, I guess, in all the things that contribute to a game, all the dimensions of a game? Like, where would you rank it, or how important do you just think music is now in games?
Yeah, no, I actually agree with you completely. My favorite game of all time is Mega Man 3. And if you turn on Mega Man 3 and then you just select a stage and it's just on, you're going to be met with a 2D screen. It's not going to do anything without you moving it. There might be like some flashing dots in the background if they have some animation, and then you're just going to hear music. Some really awesome music, by the way. And I think that's what you're saying, is that it was so upfront and in our faces because there was not that much to interact with. 2D plane, non-linear maybe, but you're going through this game, you're beating it in an hour, but you remember that soundtrack. And I think as games got deeper and more immersive, music became less necessary. When you think about Fallout 3, for instance, or Elder Scrolls 4 or 5, I'm sure that first of all, there are awesome songs in those games, and I know that COG, I think, specifically listens to the Skyrim soundtrack, but I think about that game as just being silent and empty. And it's me and the game and the world. The music doesn't really play a part. There might be a crescendo in the score, a moment might be happening where they have a little piece there. I think sometimes, though, music does play in, and I think games like The Last of Us and others where there's nice little... Those are games where you play with, at least I do, I play with headphones on. But I'm also like you, where I'll listen to a podcast or listen to music or just be talking to my fiance or just be dicking around on my phone half the time I'm playing a game. I mean, I played Tiny Tina's Wonderlands or whatever. I beat the entire thing. I don't think I listened to one word that was said in that game, to be perfectly honest with you. So I'm totally the same way. I love my checkbox games, as I say, my Far Cries and all of that. And there are games even when I will tune out, and then when there's a story scene, I'll pause my podcast and listen, and then I'll tune back out again. I think that's a lot of my just ADD and my inability to focus. But I generally agree with you. I think music is sometimes important, and a lot of people love it. It's like a phenomenal thing. And there are games like Mega Man and Castlevania and Persona and others where the music is iconic. But for me, and Final Fantasy and all this stuff. But for me, I would agree with you. How could you think that the design of a game, the graphical fidelity of a game, and the story of a game and characters and all those things, those are so much more important. They're so much more in your face and necessary to interact with. So I don't want to discount music. I'm a musician, but for me, I agree with you. It has become so much less important. And all my favorite music from video games is from ages ago. I can't even tell you what games sound like a lot of the times. If you ask me to pick out, like, what is your favorite song from Evil West? Like, our Dead Space remake, like these games I've platinumed. I'm like, I have no fucking idea what my favorite song would be from that. I don't even think there was a song.
Yeah.
So,
like, yeah. To me, I think it's the right word is music in games right now is just not memorable, because I can't, like, it's just not memorable. Like, yeah, I could probably identify, like, for example, God of War's music, but that's because God of War is, they're using the same, like, that orchestra music, I guess it is. I'm not even sure what it is, but that's from God of War 1 back, from all the way then. So that's why, the only reason why it's identifiable. And I think when you actually care about something, you put action into it, because they'll tell me, like, no, I think music is extremely important, but okay, but what we put our money into is these high-end TVs for graphics, to bring out all the graphics and the features of these consoles, right? Nobody's, music enthusiast and people who care about those things, yeah, they have very expensive speaker systems and headphones and all that stuff. But the average person is not buying that. They're not investing all this money to hear every little note in these games and from the music in these games. So that's why I just don't kind of believe people when they say music is that important to them in games. I just think they're full of shit. But
I think in terms of, I think one thing I will say is that I think in some sense in more immersive games, maybe sound is vital. Like the immersive nature of wearing headphones, 3D audio, all that kind of stuff. It really became, I thought playing Horizon Forbidden West, especially about a year ago, was one of those things. I played it with my Pulse headset on, and I was like, this is incredible. But it wasn't really like the musical stings that were getting me. It was just the nature, the wind through the leaves, and it was very ethereal and real. And so I think that there's something about that. But I will say that the beauty is that even if it's not important to us, AAA studios have the means and the mode to deliver those audio experiences for people that it is important to. And I will say music has never ruined an experience for me, I don't think. So put all the money and time and effort you want into it for the people that it's important to, who are legion, no doubt. And I think of COG. I always think about his workout pictures, and he's always playing his Destiny 2 soundtrack or his whatever, his Gears of War soundtrack. And so there's definitely people out there where they would miss it.
Yeah, I just care about sound design and sound engineering. Like recently playing Dead Space, they're amazing. With how they designed the sound in that game so intentionally for the atmosphere. Yeah. Okay. Now, another thing that me and my podcast members argue about a lot, and I faced a lot of shit with PlayStation fans, right? I'm obviously a PlayStation fan, but this is something that I feel like since last generation, I've been just butting heads with PlayStation fans about, and it's the lack of multiplayer games from PlayStation. We know they announced they're working on a bunch now, especially, games as a service. But I've been screaming from the rooftops last generation. If PlayStation is going to charge us to play online, I also think you need to provide first-party software that we can play online, which they largely did not do. And I don't know why, but PlayStation fans always just were very resistant with me about this. They would I would literally just be on Twitter, saying what I'm saying. PlayStation needs to provide multiplayer games, and it would be like, oh, shut the fuck up. Go play some third-party game. Go play COD. Go play Madden. Right. But PlayStation is charging me for online. They should also be making some first-party multiplayer games, and they would just I would get torched online, for this type of shit. And I just never really. I just don't understand why, and I don't know if you get this sentiment from them. I know you largely try to avoid Twitter, but PlayStation fans, they're just largely against anything. Not all of them, but the loud voices are just against anything having to do with multiplayer, co-op, and anything online as far as PlayStation first party goes. Right? They want them to seem to just want them to keep focusing only on single player, story-driven games, which are fucking amazing. We know that, but I just don't know why they want to just pigeonhole PlayStation into only doing that. When if you think these studios are so fucking great, which I believe they are, why do you only think they should or can do that? Because my podcast members think that these live service games PlayStations are working on, that they have damn near no hope, and all of them are gonna fail and shit. So I just want to get your thoughts on that so far. I have some other, shit related to that, but want to get your thoughts.
It's an interesting question. It goes into, I guess, this notion of, can we have it all? And I say on my show a lot that the reason I think Sony is being so silent and has been so conspicuously silent about the future is because I don't know that hardcore PlayStation fans are going to like what they see out of some of what Sony is going to be pushing. You can see that even from some of the purchases they're making, whether they purchase Haven, which seems like it's for some sort of online functionality, some sort of service game that they might be working on, or tool set that they're interested in, or a company working on mobile games, or whatever the case might be. They're starting to maybe focus in these other places. And maybe what's really important in this sense is the game that will be the missing link, that will kind of allay the multiplayer crowd and satisfy the single player crowd that PlayStation is known for. And for me, the last game that really did that actually in first party or even in second party was The Last of Us in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Factions could be that game. We were reading into the commentary lately from Naughty Dog about it. Specifically, they say, and I don't know if you picked this up, in their write-up on their blog, they say, you and a friend, singular, will play this game together. And I'm like, is this going to be some sort of game that's much more narrative and story-driven than we realize, that gets people a little more comfortable with online through something like co-op, something more manageable, like It Takes Two or something like that, where it's like you just need one friend. And this kind of wraps people's minds around this thing, the hardcore, that they need to be more open-minded to the games that will come after that, which will be much more multiplayer-centric. And it doesn't mean we're not going to get Spider-Man and we're not going to get, Resistance or whatever games come back. I have no idea. But we're going to get that always, because those games sell and make a ton of money. Hundreds of millions of dollars in profit. God of War Ragnarok made its money back in a millisecond. Mm-hmm. And then made it twice and 3 times back. They're always going to make that. But it's important to note that the big money is definitely in games as a service. And I do think PlayStation needs to play there. And they probably will lose most of their bouts. Everyone does.
Mm-hmm.
Epic loses and 2K loses. But the thing is that Sony doesn't play. Yeah. And so the last time they played was Kill Strain and Drawn to Death, which wasn't even really supposed to be a free-to-play game in the beginning. It was supposed to be a game that you were going to buy. And they just kind of got scared off. And then they doubled down on the third-person action that they do so well. But they've pigeonholed themselves quite profitably there, but it limits their exposure and expansion to wider audiences. And there's this theory that there's always that there, for the last 20 years or so, has always been 250 million hardcore gamers, and that people come in and out of that group, but it basically remains stagnant. I think the thing that people are chasing is trying to figure out how can we grow that number and bring them into the core. And maybe that's through the games that they want to play. And so I think it's smart for Sony to invest in games as a service, and a studio like Bungie. I'd prefer Sony doesn't buy anyone. I've said that all over and over again. I don't want Sony to buy any teams. I don't think they need to buy any teams. I think it would be cool to make teams, make a bunch of new teams from the ground up. But Bungie was a wise investment, and I think a sign of things to come. They need their expertise. They need their tool set and their know-how. And they locked everyone into that studio by giving them over $1 billion in bonuses. So they were dead serious about getting involved here. And now I think we're going to see that come to fruition over the next 6, 12, 18, 24 months. The point is, the thing is, can we have it all? And I think that the answer is probably yes. If the first party focuses primarily on what they're good at for the most part, which is single player games, they get second parties and some first parties and maybe even some time third parties to make multiplayer games. You can have it all. But there is the argument that, like, it doesn't matter. Call of Duty is going to destroy it. Fortnite's going to destroy it. Maybe so. But if Sony does find that singular game that can make it $1 billion, $2 billion a year, that will be more money than they make on all their first-party games combined every year. And I think they would be really thrilled if they can get that, even if they have to fail 9 times to get that 10th game. And I think that's what they're going to be chasing. So everyone should get ready.
Yeah, because I don't, because because I defend games as a service, so my podcast members they're going to expect me to play every fucking live service game they make because I defend it. That's not the case I'm trying to make. I'm not saying I'm going to like all these games they make. I know I'm not going to like all of them. I don't think all of them are going to succeed. The majority will probably fail, but if 3 are successes, I think that might be a good that might be a good deal. And I don't think all these live service games 10 that they announce, not all first party, right? Aren't some of them partnerships?
Yeah, they'll be second. They were never clear. It's like Sony published, so they could be second party games. They could even be third party exclusives too, which are making a comeback. So no, I don't think that most of them will be first party. And like one of them can be that MMO for Horizon MMO. That's in development, right? Like that's one of them. Who the hell knows? It's like what's so funny about it is that we just have to watch it play out. And I understand the trepidation and fear from PlayStation fans as one. You're one too. We know what we like. We like what we like. We get what we like. That's worked out really well since the mid PS3 era all the way through to today. No doubt about it. But I think broadening our horizons a little bit. I'm a single player straight up. I played the Division and the Division 2 by myself. You know, I platinumed Outriders by myself. I'm probably going to play some of these games as a service by myself. If they're not available for me to play that way, I'm probably not going to play them at all. It's very similar to what I was saying about Gran Turismo and what we were saying about knowing what you like. But I'm not the person they're chasing. They want the younger gamer, the more pliable gamer that plays a game as a service, that focuses in, that become whales, and they make lots and lots of money. And it's important to note that yes, Sony will make $300, $400, $500 million in profit on God of War Ragnarok. Yes, in their first year. But they had to invest $250 million to make that game or whatever it was and to advertise it. Now you have a game that costs the same amount to make and you can extract 5, 6, 7, 8 times that much out of it. I mean, that is the imperative, and that can pay for more of our Days Gones, more of our Ghosts of Tsushimas. Hopefully not more of our dreams. What a mismanaged studio Media Molecule is. But most of the time, Sony gets it right. And we have to just, I think, keep an open mind and hold their feet to the fire if they don't get it right. I think that's why they're a little scared of moving forward, because I think they know this is going to be a bit of a different feel. And so get ready for it. And I know you are. I am too.
Yeah. You mentioned Media Molecule and Dreams. I actually have a question about that later. But okay. I'm gonna wait. So yeah, with games as a service, like I played Last of Us Factions for like 6 years. Like I actually love that. Can't wait for Factions 2. There was like a games as a service apocalypse like 2-3 weeks ago, where like I don't know, 5, 6, 7 studios announced that they were shutting down their live service games, and that led to people's belief that most live service games is just not the way they want the industry to go, and they're just destined to fail outside of like probably whatever the top 10 successful multiplayer games are, you know, COD, Fortnite, Valorant, and the rest. But most of them are failing. I have my reasons as to why I believe some of these are failing, and I know it's hard to pinpoint one major reason why they're not working. But if you could, what do you think? Why do you think most of these are just failing and not working?
Time. I just think that they require too much from people, and you can only if you have a predilection for a game as a service, like you like playing free to play shooters, and then you have 8 of them to choose from, and then a 9th one comes in. The thing that they're competing for is your attention against 8 other competitors in that situation. And so for me, it's money comes from that and is derivative of that. But I really do think it's time and attention. It's the same reason why back in 2016 everyone was making fun of EA for releasing Titanfall 2 and Battlefield 1 like 2 weeks from each other. It's like, what are you doing? Why would you do that to your own game? That's something your competitor would do to you. You wouldn't do that to yourself. And so I think that that's also another thing that's holding it up is that a lot of these publishers want that Fortnite money. They want the $4, $5, $6 billion. Like they just want it. They can taste it. But what they realize is that they have to get out of their own way. And if they're serious about chasing a game as a service as this big behemoth that they want it to be, that requires what I would assume is a lot of like skunk working, like making things and not releasing them, having things in secret, developing and trying to figure out the right way and the right way to move forward and finding the one product that you'll get people's attention with. Because it's hard to vie for people's attention. And when a game like Dead Space Remake comes out, it does so well because it says, I just want 15 hours from you. That's all I want. And people are like, oh, cool. And then they buy it and they love it. And contrasted to this infinite sea of bullshit that they have to deal with games as a service, I don't mind them as a function of the economy and the gaming economy and how important they are. I just think that there are too many of them. And what I would think is that if you're a small fry or a little fry, you don't even want to be in that space. That's not even safe for you to be in.
I agree.
You could have a big upside, but what are you even doing? I think it's for the big fish to try to like elbow each other out of the way. And we see how important Jesus Christ, Sony is chasing this games as a service stuff. At the same time, they're trying to convince a court that Call of Duty is so irreparably important to their platform that it cannot possibly be with their competitor. These things don't really line up and shows that they're chasing different strategies concurrently, which any business should. Trying to protect their flank while they chase their own money. They would much rather have their own Call of Duty so they get 100% of the money instead of 30%. But they also realize that that's unlikely. So it's a huge business quandary. I think it's fascinating. I'm glad you guys talk about it too, because this stuff's almost more interesting to me than the games themselves, is the strategy of getting them out and getting people to play. Very, very interesting.
Yeah. I think one of the mistakes a lot of them are making, like I agree with you that, that you should leave it to the big publishers and developers for live service games because, you have to support them long term and you got to have a really good base game. And it's hard to do that if you're, smaller with less resources. So some IPs Sony could do, you've mentioned some of them. We know Resistance, Killzone, SOCOM.
SOCOM's the big one to me. Like that seemed to be so obvious that it was frustrating to me. I think we tried. So I don't know if you made this connection. Like the original creative director of the Rainbow Six Siege team went to Guerrilla.
Yep.
And at that time, it's like, well, it's got to be SOCOM, right? I mean, that like it is literally so. But it seems like it might be that Horizon Online game. Yeah. Which is a major disappointment. Yeah. But you're like, Killzone. I would say Killzone, SOCOM, maybe Twisted Metal. I mean, we're gonna see Twisted Metal. I don't know what that's gonna look like. That could very well be a single player game with like multiplayer dynamics, for all we know, like with a campaign and all of that. But I think those games, and I think that there could be some other ones. It would be cool for them to explore. Like, could you do a free to play like space shooter and make it a Colony Wars game? Could you make a GTA clone like The Getaway or so I think that there's a lot of different things for them to explore, but I think the shooter space is the safest place, and I'm surprised that one of those 3 you mentioned has not been announced yet, because that seems so obvious to me.
A lot of people look at those IPs and the fact that they are dormant as a sign of failure and believe that they couldn't succeed now as a live service game though. And I strongly disagree with them. I think if Killzone came back, Resistance, SOCOM, I think they all have a strong chance because I think they're actually unique, right? I don't care what people say. I think Killzone is very unique. There's not really any game right now that plays like that plays like Killzone, looks like it. Um, the setting, there's nothing really like it out there right now, and I think that's what contributes to your chances of success is if you fill a gap. A lot of these games, I feel, try to be like Fortnite adjacent, whether it's like the art style, in the aesthetic, or just the gameplay. It's a lot of these games seem to be like, okay, like Rumbleverse, for example, that wrestling game. That I feel like that's just Fortnite if you spun it off into a wrestling game. And I think a lot of people look at these things like, okay, if I want to play Fortnite, I'll just go play Fortnite. Right? So why are you making this game so similar, whether it be in looks or gameplay, to Fortnite? I think a lot of these Sony IPs don't play like anything else. So I think that's a pro and a strength that they have. And I think these dormant IPs have a good chance.
Yeah, there's a few that, like, I still think, as I said, like the Getaway is the really big one that I'm surprised they haven't tried to do something with, just because of Grand Theft Auto's just insane popularity and how big the original, like, or not big, I mean, it sold several million copies, but how popular the original Getaway was, and that abandoned PS3 third Getaway game. But as far as like that trio of shooters, I agree with you. Killzone is pretty distinct, actually, and I actually think you could even reboot Killzone in a really timely and modern way, because it's basically about apartheid. I mean, it's about these two groups of people that fucking hate each other and can't even live on the same planet with each other. I mean, that's what Killzone's about. And you could spin that into something meaningful. Like, it wasn't the disappointing thing about Guerrilla's positioning with the original Killzone and Killzone 2 and 3 was, and they started to finally get it with Shadowfall, but it was too late, was you can take this a little more seriously. Like, we really might have a cool story here, but I don't think people were quite prepared for it. They weren't really looking for it. It was more about its online functionality and its suite of online features and the graphical fidelity and people busting balls about Killzone 2 at E3 and all these different things. And that all got lost. But I think that there's something there about Killzone coming back, and they can really tell the story about the humans in the Helghast and make it this really disturbing modern story. And Resistance, I think Resistance 3 is one of the greatest single-player shooters ever. I think that game is absolutely sublime. And I've talked about it on our show, but they were going to continue Resistance. Like, Resistance 3 had a different ending originally. Like, Resistance was going to continue, and it didn't go ahead because they felt like it kind of thematically conflicted in some way with The Last of Us. And I kind of think that is true, and I think that is still true. The disappointing thing about that, though, is that we still got Days Gone and other things that I think would have also conflicted. You kind of already have your post-apocalyptic, weird, earth decaying, dying shit. I actually like Resistance more than Killzone, but I think it doesn't fit as well. What I think they should prioritize is getting those three Resistance games on PS4 at the very least, if not PS5. Give Fall of Man trophies, get these games running at 60 frames, modernize them. I would love to see something like that. And it's frustrating because I'm sure you see Insomniac often on social media tweets out or sends out pictures of Chimera for no reason. And so I don't know if that's like an indication of something. They don't seem to do it with their other games. I don't know if I'm just missing it. So I don't know if they're just teasing or fucking around with people. But I'd love to see it come back, but I do think it conflicts. I think if that happens, you're going to get the dad simulator argument, but it's going to be the apocalypse simulator argument. And people are like, oh, it's Killzone is kind of apocalyptic, but it's actually dystopian. It's futuristic. It's science fiction, So I think that it would fit a lot better. But I visualize Killzone as a rebooted single player game, like with multiplayer suite. Not even the game of a service that we're talking about. I think that is SOCOM, and I think by competing with something like Rainbow Six Siege, something and getting a little long in the tooth, right?
Yeah.
But people still love it. But I think people would hop to something that was really competent. Yeah. And SOCOM is perfect for that.
Yeah, because I say all the time, it's you're filling a void outside of Rainbow Six Siege. You don't really have a choice in a strategic tactical shooter like that. That's your go-to. That's all you really have. So I definitely think they're missing out on an opportunity if they're not, looking into it. And yeah, I was actually like stalking that guy's page that you mentioned that left and went to Guerrilla. I'm like, oh yeah, it's got to be SOCOM. But the timing kind of matches up with that Horizon co-op or multiplayer game. Unfortunately, like I'm
yeah, it seemed.
You know,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say I'm interested in that too, but I would much rather SOCOM.
Yeah, I think I love Horizon. Like, I think Forbidden West is mega underrated. I think the story is so good. It was so weird and twisted and fun. But I'm afraid that they're gonna run it into the ground sooner rather than later, and I'm a little worried about that. Even playing Call of the Mountain, I was like, I don't know that I need to be in this world this much, you know. So I am a little worried about that. And I think SOCOM would have been something fresh. But you know, the demise of SOCOM and Zipper, you know, over 10 years ago is disappointing, because I think if things went differently for SOCOM 4 and the PSN didn't go out and it became a more relevant game, I think Zipper would have allowed itself to mature and attract more talent to the point where they'd probably be a studio that would be pretty important to Sony right now, because they were actually making a kind of game that Sony didn't realize it needed. And because they shut them down after Unit 13, it feels like a lost opportunity. It's just one of the many choices they could have made that were different. And so I who knows if we'll ever see SOCOM come back. I know that one guy, what is his name? David, it's like something, it's Sears or something like that. Yeah. I know he did that game, like H Hour or something. I think it was called H Hour. And I know
died very fast, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know that there's like a huge call for a new SOCOM game, but I just don't know that I don't think it's very similar to MotorStorm. It's like we didn't really have the appropriate data to know if that was over or not, because MotorStorm's example with Apocalypse, it was screwed by the Japanese earthquake, and with SOCOM 4 it came out and then the PSN literally went down, I think the day after or something like that. So we don't really know, and that's the most disappointing part. We didn't get all the data.
Yeah. We'll see what PlayStation does, because it's been, I think someone said it's been a year and 6 or 7 months since the last actual like big first party show, the one where they show Spider-Man 2, I think. And you know, there's that theory that they've been holding back because of this whole ABK thing. So I assume we're gonna get all the answers, you know, of what they're actually doing sometime this year, hopefully.
Oh yeah, I would imagine. I know it's rumored before E3. I would think May would be I don't know anything about this specifically, but I would think May would be the time, and it's going to be exciting, man, because you know, for PlayStation people like us, because now we're gonna have to comb, you know, the first and second party and try to really figure out like who's ready to go, who's up, who can we expect to hear from, who has that secret second team that we didn't know about, who's making that Uncharted game, you know, that obvious Uncharted game starring either Cassie or maybe even Drake's mom.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're going to start playing, you know, being investigators soon enough, which is going to be really fun, and playing detective on who's making what. I'm just really excited to see who's ready to go, and that undoubted surprise when you see, like, I'm hoping to see a Media Molecule logo. It's like, what a waste. Get this going, you know, create something whimsical and weird. That's what you're supposed to do. And so I'm excited to see something random from one of the partners, and then probably something unexpected from a second or third party as well, which will be cool too. And I know for sure, actually, the second party like picture is far from clear. I think that's where a lot of these games are going to come from.
Yeah. Okay. I want to pivot into another topic. I want to talk about Phil Spencer and Gamepass. So Phil Spencer, a while ago, I think this was sometime last year, came out and said in an interview, you know, every time Phil Spencer does interviews, it always makes headlines. He said what I felt in a very like nonchalant way, that he said Game Pass is profitable, right? Mm-hmm. Now, my kind of rule of thumb is I don't really argue against somebody who obviously has more like knowledge, like the behind the scenes, the numbers, the metrics and stuff. I can't necessarily tell him that that's not true. You know, he's the head of Xbox Studios, so he has all the numbers that I can't debate. But I know that you have been very skeptical of the things he said, and you don't necessarily believe that he's telling the whole truth about it being profitable. So I just wanted you to, I guess, kind of explain your logic as to why you think he's not telling the whole truth with the Game Pass numbers. Because the only thing what I was skeptical about was, you know, most subscription services across, you know, TV, movies, music, anything are not profitable, right? Mm-hmm. That's the report say. I think Spotify might have just reached profitability, maybe. I think I read that. But most of them are not profitable. So And games cost more to make than music and movies, if I'm not mistaken. So if he found a way to make Game Pass profitable this quickly, I thought it would be a bigger deal. He mentioned it in that interview, and then it was never mentioned again. I'm like, I thought this would be a huge fucking announcement if you're one of the very few to figure out a way to make a subscription service profitable. So that's what I found weird about it. But I don't, like I said, I don't argue against it because he has all the numbers behind the scenes. But like I said, you don't believe him. So I wanted you to just explain your logic as to why you don't.
No, I don't believe him at all. I think that, and I've said this, I put it this way, where if you were to look at the ledger somehow, and it's like, this is what we spent on Game Pass, right? And then this is what we brought in on Game Pass. I bet you they brought in more money on Game Pass than they spent getting content on Game Pass. I bet you that is totally true. And I think that is what he's talking about. But that is not how you gauge the profitability of Game Pass, because the entire missing component are all of the games you're not selling and all of the games that people are expecting to get as part of your subscription, including first and second party games. So if you spend $200 million on a game, you're never going to make that back in a la carte sales if it's on Game Pass. That's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So you have to include that in the money that you're not making or are making on the service. That's $200 million that is going into a product for Game Pass. And when you take all of those numbers in, the Forza numbers, the Halo numbers, Sea of Thieves, whatever it is, there's no way I believe that number is like that they are making more money on Game Pass than they are developing games for Game Pass and, you know, paying royalties on the games that are on there. There's just, that doesn't make any sense. And so I've long been vociferous about that. And I thought that things came out more recently that kind of really threw that into doubt, that was kind of like nonsensical. Like, just like when they were saying like, oh, people that have Game Pass buy more games. I'm like, there's no way that that's true. Mm-hmm. Like, that's nonsense. That doesn't even make any sense. And if you went and looked at, like, there's certainly this logical thing that they have no doubt on a piece of paper where it's like, this is what we have. But you know fundamentally that if you have Game Pass, you're buying fewer games, actually. There's just no way. Why would you have Game Pass then? So I kind of just read between the lines and assume it's not only with Microsoft, but with everyone. I just assume everyone's lying. Like that's, or obfuscating or not, you know, in some way to some benefit. It's the same thing with like Microsoft making themselves seem so feeble in the Activision things. Like that's to their benefit. But there are other times where Microsoft will represent themselves as a huge behemoth in the industries, depending on what makes them, what kind of fits. So to reiterate, it's like money in, money out. Yes, I think that they make more money on Game Pass than they are paying on royalties and license fees for games on Game Pass. But again, if part of having Game Pass is first and second party support in which no one is buying your games, then that is part of the equation. And that's hundreds of millions of dollars a quarter. Like in just making games that are not going to sell because they're for Game Pass. And that's part of doing business on Game Pass. I don't blame them for that. That's what they're doing. You have to acknowledge that. And it's like you said, none of the others were really afraid. Netflix and Amazon Prime and others were not afraid of saying like, this isn't really panning out for us. Like we're not profitable yet. And people forget that once you turn from it being in the red to being in the black, you still have all of the debt that you accumulated too. So it's not like it's like just free. It's like, well, we're finally profitable. Yay. It's like, well, no. What about the hundreds of millions, billions of dollars you just lost as well? So I just think the total mathematical equation is unknown. This isn't unusual for Microsoft. People don't like to hear this, but Microsoft does not speak specifics about Xbox numbers. They haven't since the Xbox 360 era. They have obfuscated with the numbers the entire time since then. We don't even know how many units Xbox One sold. So it would be no surprise that we don't have full clarity on the entire situation with Game Pass. But I just ask everyone to use their brains. Does that make sense to you? Like I know that some people don't understand my argument, but now that I've explained it, certainly that makes sense to people. That you have to account for the first and second party catalog that is central to Game Pass's success, in which no one is buying those games. Right? Yeah. And by the way, you're training your audience not to buy games too, and that also comes with a we see that in UK all the time. What didn't Wo Long sell 96% to 4% on PS5 or something like that? I mean, that's not a product of Xbox's unpopularity. That's not representative of how few people have Xbox. That's representative of a group of people that are not buying games.
But what do you say?
Because there's
no
reason to.
Sorry to cut you off, but what do you say to the people like in the UK situation? They say the UK is a very small sample size and they're so small it doesn't even matter. Because I see that a lot, right? They say, it's the UK. It's compared to the US and other territories, they're insignificant.
I mean, they are a small territory, but it's just how you glean information about anything. When you read a poll and it says, Joe Biden has 56% approval or whatever, that poll is of 1,000 people. It's not a poll of the United States. So you have to just like take the data that's presented to you. And unfortunately, like the territories that are most open with their data are the UK and Japan. And we can only glean so much information from them, especially Japan. Like you can get the most granular numbers going all the way back to the 80s with every Japanese release ever, which is totally awesome. But we don't, and that exists in the US, but you have to pay a lot of money for that. We used to have that at IGN. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for that access. You could see down to the app individual game, like, oh, someone found a Dreamcast game on a shelf and scanned it and sold it at a store, and here it is. So it would be like that granular. But since that's the only information we have to just use it to the best of our ability. And remember that there's just a vacuum of information because Microsoft doesn't release information of its own. Instead of releasing sales numbers or data or how much money they make or whatever, they just say things like Game Pass subscribers buy 10% more games or whatever. It's like, oh, okay. So I'm doing the best I can, I guess is what I'm saying. If people want more specificity, they got to go to the source. I can't do anything about that.
Yeah. Like when he said, there was a report, and I don't know the exact context of it. I think that this came out of the ABK, documents. That it claimed Game Pass, cannibalizes, sales, which, most of us already assumed, even though he made the statement that more people buy games. But I think Phil Spencer words things in a way where he can like get away with it and say it's not a flat out lie, right? So I guess I can't completely knock him for that. Because like he'll say like tend to buy or tend to spend more money, and it's a case by case basis, where it's not like every situation, not every gamer. So he definitely gets away with, kind of being a silver tongue devil, which I don't knock him all the way for, but he definitely skirts around the truth a little bit. But I think everybody does.
I don't like. I just don't trust corporations. I just think they all lie. I mean, I'm totally skeptical of power and corporations and CEOs, and I am a CEO, I guess, but my business is irrelevant. I just assume that people are kind of these are media trained people with PR and intent. They're traded on markets. They have to be very careful about the data they present. So I'm not saying that's why they present so little data is because they have to tell the truth about numbers. Like they have to say like, oh, well, here's like a way we can spin this into this player number or this how many people are doing, because that's all they say. And I'm not begrudging them that, but it's just true. And I was a journalist during the Xbox 360 era. What you knew every month during the Xbox 360 era was how many Xbox 360s they sold. Yeah. How many games sold on the Xbox 360. How many months it was that they were outselling the PlayStation 3. When you're confident, you talk about your numbers. And when you're not confident, you hide your numbers. And that's just reality. I'm not begrudging them that. And I also don't begrudge Microsoft's pursuit of a totally different business model. I personally think it's a destructive business model to games. I don't think it's going to resonate with as many people as they think it's going to resonate with at the prices that they think they're going to have to offer it at. In other words, I think a service like this will have to be much more expensive. Those are the numbers that we were talking about earlier. A lot of people are on Game Pass with $1 a month, $5 a month. I mean, they're not paying the adequate amount of money for it. So we don't really know how that all shakes out. But my bigger problem with Phil Spencer, I'm not going to call him a liar or anything like that. I have no idea. But what I will say is that like it seems weird that he's not held to account for what I would consider like categorical first and second party failure of Xbox under his tutelage, going all the way back to what I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years. I mean, they've released very little of consequence. And that to me is a bigger problem with Phil Spencer than the way he spins the numbers. And maybe that falls to Matt Booty and other guys underneath, but it's surprising to me that he has such a cult of personality around him. He seems like a perfectly nice guy. He's totally reasonable. He seems very friendly. He goes to things and events and deals with fans. I think that's all very cool. But it is surprising to me that, like, if I were a fan of that and I was seeing that, I would want, like, someone's head at that point. It's like, where are the games? Where are the products that we can look forward to that differentiate us? And instead, we're too focused on, like, the acquisition of publishers or the acquisition of developers and assets in that way. So to me, I think that that's a bigger failing with Phil Spencer and one that a lot of people don't bring up. And I'm a little surprised by that, but because it seems pretty obvious that it's not going right, you know?
Yeah, because Game Pass is one of those things. I don't knock it, but it's definitely one of those things that has to exist in perpetuity. You can't ever, because once you condition people that they're getting these first party games day one in a subscription service, you can't just take that away. They're already too used to it and adjusted. This is what they're used to in their life as far as spending and gaming. So you got to stick with this, forever, which, they got all that, money. I don't count their pockets, but, $1 trillion company, whatever the amount of money they have.
Well, it's all good. Good for them. I mean, but you're right. They've committed to it. Like there's no walking it back now. You can't. You can't undo it. So they've cast their line in, and they're going to try to make it seem as good as possible. But I just think just knowing the mathematics of the games industry, how much it costs to buy and make games and all the rest, you can't make it happen for $15 a month. Mm-hmm. I don't think so. I just don't. I don't know how that. And they're certainly not making that happen now.
Okay. So yeah. But you've said you don't think Phil Spencer has done a particularly good job since he became head. Okay. I'm gonna give a little pushback.
Please.
What about? I'm just gonna play devil's advocate. What I hear people bring up. Okay. What about the fact that he's brought what were they at one point? 5 studios, to between 25 and 30 studios now. He's grown, the Xbox, amount of studios, and even though it's taken a while, eventually I feel like people have been saying that forever. Eventually they will release games and get on a cadence of releasing games that they would release a big game once per quarter. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think we have to examine like the situation through like a moving timeline. I think there was a time when Xbox didn't only look really powerful to me, but like maybe going to take the lead again towards that end of the Xbox One era. PS4 is still very strong, but Xbox is talking really smart. You got the smart delivery, you got Gamepass kind of cooking, some promise of some new games, a lot of these acquisitions that happened in 2018 and beyond, and all of the rest. But for me, I look around, and this is the concern I have with PlayStation Studios growing too much, and like why I really don't want them to buy any more studios. I really hope that they just stop, and if anything, like I say, make new studios from within. But you have to produce, like you have to manage this stuff. It's the problem I talk about with Embracer Group, and something that they're realizing, I think, and are going to realize as they are inevitably shrunk down from the size they are over the years to come, which is going to no doubt happen, is that you can't have a headcount this big and make this many games and kind of draw a profit and have everything be good and have everything come out. For me, I would rather see Microsoft with like 15 really tight studios that are working on a cadence, like you said, of like a game a quarter or so, and get those games out. Instead, they have twice as many studios making twice as few games. Teams that seem to have gone off the radar. And I also want to say that I think Halo. I think Halo is cool. I mean, I liked Halo 1 and 2. It's not my game anymore, obviously, in a long time. But that the relative, and I think that's an important word, relative failure of that game is a firing worthy offense. That's like delivering an Uncharted that's a 6, or something like you can't let that. How did that even happen with like your prize jewel? And so I wonder. It's like Truman used to say. The buck stops with me. Like, where does the buck stop? Whose fault is it that there are so few games? Whose fault is it that, Halo didn't reach, its pinnacle and 343 was so woefully mismanaged and all the rest? And I'm surprised that people on the other side of the fandom aren't more interested in those answers. Because I remember when the PS3 was in complete free fall mode in 2006, 2007, 2008, everyone was like, this shit sucks. Everyone hated it. Like, we all hated it. I hated it. I couldn't stand it. The PS3 really didn't become the console we remember fondly until the Slim came out. And Uncharted 2 in 2009 and all of that. It took a time. Yep. But what I remember about that time was being like critical to the point of almost fatalism. It was almost funny. I almost long for those days because it was hysterical. Like how fatalistic PlayStation was at that point, like the whole fandom. And so I'm a little surprised that people make excuses for what I would deem as obvious mismanagement of assets. With 30 or 35 teams or whatever, you should be having games out constantly. at the end. But to me, I'm like, that's just too much to manage. I don't blame them for not being able to manage it. It's just you shouldn't be in that position to begin with, and that's why I hope Sony just cools down on the acquisitions and really worries about what they have. They don't need much more, I don't think.
Maybe Xbox should bring back Don Magic. I like them.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean,
he was bad in front of the camera. He obviously really screwed up Zynga after he left Xbox too, so he's kind of got this double whammy. But my thing is that it's someone probably someone new. I mean, it's someone different. We always busted Jim Ryan's balls, but and we call him Crying Jim on Sacred Symbols. We just like making fun of him for some reason. We just think it's hysterical to make. Yeah, it's just like he's just fun to make fun of and bust balls. And again, I have this inherently adversarial kind of stance towards even PlayStation, even a brand I like, where it's like I don't want to be too buddy with you. I don't want to like you guys too much. I'm certainly not going to drink your Kool-Aid or rep you guys and like, amp you up in any way. And so I think that like an honest assessment of Xbox's situation over the last few years would require someone to say like, well, could someone else lead this ship? It doesn't mean Game Pass is a bad idea or Xbox can't succeed or that Xbox can't even be PlayStation. It just means that it's not happening. And maybe it's time to make a change. And I know that they're trying to make that change with the Activision thing. I don't particularly care one way or the other, to be honest with you, whether it happens or not. I'm kind of more tired of talking about it, but that's a sign of that's a desperation move. That you're even going to make your family even bigger now. And bloat it even more. And I don't know how that's going to work.
Just to make you feel better, I have no ABKA questions on my list. I hate talking about that shit.
It's all good. I don't mind.
Yeah, I'm sick of even seeing news about that. I just hope it gets done soon and whichever direction. The Vita, you love the Vita, right?
Oh yes, yes.
I'm not a fan of handhelds. Let me just say that up front. I just don't like the handheld experience, right? And a lot of people clamor for PlayStation to go back and make a handheld. Would you, with the success of the Switch, and people assume that Nintendo's next console is going to be something similar, and with Steam Deck, being super, well, I'm not going to say super popular, but clearly very, very popular and growing. And PlayStation putting their games on PC so people have access to play them on Steam Deck. Do you think it even makes sense, even with how much you and other people love the handhelds from Sony? Does it really make any sense for them to go back and do that, make another one?
No, I don't think so. I mean, there are a few reasons why that is. Number one, I think PSP sales were, I think, overstated, not only by geography. I think it was very popular in certain places like Japan, but also I think people were just hacking it to no end and weren't even buying games for it. And I don't think that like 80 million is really an accurate representation of the interest level of a PlayStation handheld. And I think that was kind of it's what I was saying earlier, like we only have the data we can work with, but then we have to read the data and try to figure it out. And I think that's why those sales numbers were so high and so long lasting. And with Vita, I think we have to just kind of look at the numbers and say, well, the market kind of spoke that didn't want it. Like, I don't think Sony supported it very well. I think Sony could have done more, but I don't know what they could have extracted, because even if it sold twice as well as it did, we're talking about something in the high 30 millions that is like a modest success and probably not worth their time or effort, which is what makes VR so interesting too, because I feel like Sony's very insistent on that, but I think it's a similar story where I don't know that there's much fruit to be gained there. But my caution with Switch is that PS5 and Xbox Series X have made Switch look very old. And I think we have to be careful what we ask for when we ask for a handheld, because of all of the corners that have to be cut to get it into handheld form. And there are cool things like Steam Deck and all that, and I think that's awesome. And Sony can go this really boutique handheld PS4 route if they want, make like a handheld PS4, and that would be pretty cool and interesting. But I just think they realize that their money, like PlayStation has thrived more than really almost ever in the post Vita era. And I think they look at it and say, like, why even get in the way? And I think for some reason, like, VR is this very cross Sony deep investment that has nothing to do with PlayStation as much as it has to do with Sony's insistence on being in the space. And so you can't really judge it for that, for like being a gaming device. I think it's more than that for them. But with PlayStation, I think they're just like, we have this one thing. And I think that when Vita came out, smartphones were only a few years old. I mean, that's so crazy to say, but it's true. And now we have like the Backbone controller, which I think is awesome. I use the Backbone controller all the time, and we basically have a handheld PS5. I mean, it's streaming through your console. It doesn't look great, but it does the trick. And so I think it's probably a distraction, and they see it as much. There's no doubt that they were looking at releasing another handheld. There's no doubt that they were pursuing what that could look like and what that could be. But it's also true that they were really scared off once Vita was cracked open as well, and why they were so eager to close it down so suddenly. And so I think they're also worried about making more problems for themselves than is really worth.
Yeah, because I say, all the time that, I don't want them to make another handheld. It's obviously my bias since I'm not a fan. But I also look at it as, okay, well, I bought because I bought a PSVR2, and I know that that's still something that may stay niche. Maybe it outsells the original PSVR1. But even if it does, it's never going to be something. VR in general is never going to be something that's extremely mainstream that everybody's going to have in their house. If you I think the Quest 2 is at like 15 million, and that's the most successful device, I think. So we kind of see the ceiling. So I can see it that I can see the contradiction, even though they're different markets, that I like this device, even though it's niche, but I'm telling other people to give up on, the handheld, which probably, which is the same case as the PSVR. So I get it, but I still hope they never make one though.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. And I think, like I said, VR is interesting just because I think companies like Meta and Sony are eager to get away from VR gaming. I think that they want VR and they see VR as something much broader. But I think they realize like gaming is the way it's going to, like, they're going to win and get people involved first. And they have to kind of set up shop there, and it may or may not work. But I can just see a future like we're going to the moon in the coming years, right? Going back and landing on the moon again. And imagine if they dropped like 3D cameras on the moon, and you could just, with your PSVR2 headset or your Meta headset, like just be there, and turn around and see it. Like, I think they look at it as much more experiential. And I think they're just so eager to get to that point. And I think games are like the stopgap. I don't think games are the destination with VR, which is why I kind of forgive them that too. I think like the only way you can have a handheld gaming device is to be a handheld gaming device. And I think they probably just don't see it. And I think, again, an important thing is to just listen to the market with Vita. I don't know that it would be much different now, unfortunately.
Yeah, because one thing I thought about that this could be used as an application for is concerts, like live events, because I don't know if you've heard about like, all the scalping going on for concerts and things like that. And bots buying and reselling, tickets and stuff like that. So most people can't even afford to go to these concerts and festivals anymore. Yeah, like if they made it possible that you could, be at these concerts, virtually, you put on the headset and it's like you're almost there. That could be a game changer. So that's something I thought that could be pretty cool.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Like all sorts of entertainment, even like seeing family, like virtual reality and like visiting other people, not with avatars, but in some, like, I think that some of these big tech companies, especially Sony, like Sony has a deep history of technical ingenuity. They with lots of different devices. It's not, we talk about PlayStation, and I'm a Luddite personally, but everyone knows that Sony has this really huge history of dynamic tech design. And I think they just see VR as something that they really need to be, like somewhere they need to be. And so yeah, concerts, of course, it would be awesome. And but I don't know if I don't know if people want that. And I think that we're in the middle of finding that out. And to me, it seems like PSVR 2's release has been soft. It feels like it didn't do very well. And I don't know what that means. I guess we'll find out.
Okay. All right. Kojima. I'm somebody who's very, very critical of Kojima, right? So we all know the situation with Konami and Kojima, right? And a lot of people look at Konami as the devil, right? The evil corporation that was like holding Kojima hostage. And I thought about it. I'm like, how do we know that Kojima just didn't like go fucking crazy while he was over there at Konami, right? Because the guy does seem, and some people says he has a right. He does seem like somewhat like an egomaniac in some ways. Like he's the rock star, you know, in the gaming industry. Like people just roll out red carpets for him. PlayStation did it. Xbox is doing it right now, just rolling out red carpets, giving him access to, you know, any engine you want to use. You know, you pick. How much money do you want? You got it. But we don't know the story, but a lot of people, everybody always assumes it was, you know, Konami did him wrong. But how do we know he didn't like just go fucking crazy with the type of shit he was demanding and expecting? Like, isn't that a possibility? Like that it was just Kojima?
Yeah, it is possible. I mean, what's so interesting about that and what's so frustrating about the Japanese game scene is how little we really know about it because of the language barrier. And I don't think that Japan doesn't have the tradition, I think, of like deep investigative journalism, and there's more of a culture of honor and respect there. You're not trying to out people and insult people. That's why when KJ Inafune went off on Japanese gaming, you know, 13 years ago or so, people were like, "Whoa!" He was considered way out of pocket and lost a lot of like goodwill in Japan over the things he said, which is why he's kind of disappeared into obscurity. Unfortunately, he's like one of my very favorite people in the industry. But it goes to show you that people aren't like really willing to like ish, as it were, like they are in the West. We have the great, some games we don't know the stories of, but we have a lot of great stories of game development, and Metal Gear Solid 5 is just a mystery. We don't really know exactly what happened there. I would imagine that it could be a little bit of Konami and a little bit of him. The reason I think it's Konami is because Kojima wasn't the only person that had a problem there. Koji Igarashi earlier had a huge problem there too, and was basically ousted. And we used to say like they put him basically in the basement at Konami. And he was the producer of Castlevania. I mean, that's a really big deal. So clearly, and he's been doing great with Bloodstained. So part of me feels like Konami is at fault, but then, and the other part of me that feels that way is that a lot of people went with him. Like Kojima Productions was basically folded, and then just a lot of people just went and worked on Death Stranding. And I don't think that would happen if you didn't have some sort of connection to the project or some sort of connection to the person, and that wasn't mutual because he had this pick of the litter. He could basically reform his team however he wanted to, and he chose to bring a lot of those people with him. So that suggests to me that it's more Konami, especially because Konami has kind of gone off the radar and they're only now stirring again after all of these years, which is great to see because I love Castlevania, Contra. They're awesome. Bomberman. I mean, like Konami's a great storied publisher, and I'd like to see them come back on the scene. But you're right. It's possible that that's true. I'm excited, though, about Death Stranding 2. I thought Death Stranding was awesome, personally, and I want to see more. I don't know. It seems like an unusual game to go back to. I like to hear that he basically rewrote it after COVID happened, which I think is powerful and meaningful about maybe the intention behind the game. But I think is he an egomaniac? I mean, do you think? How many times do you see his name show up in the opening credits of a Metal Gear game? It's hysterical. It's like there'll be a screen, it'll just say Hideo Kojima, and then it'll say like Metal Gear Solid 2, Hideo Kojima's Metal Gear Solid, and then it'll be directed by Hideo Kojima. And it's like, of course he's an egomaniac. He's fucking, I mean, obviously, but you get what you get out of him, I guess.
Because he gets so much credit. It's like sometimes you would assume that he doesn't even have a team behind it. Sometimes it looks and feels like, oh, he did this by himself. Like that's how much credit he gives himself. Like his team is almost non-existent. That, you know, so. But I guess
it's very unnatural for me like to do that as well. That happens like it's not only Japanese studios, because I feel like Naughty Dog is like that. But you see like Nintendo and others where it seems to be about one person. You almost wonder, is it ingrained in some of the culture at these game studios to just be thankful to be part of the team? I mean, remember, it was Japanese game developers 25, 30 years ago that weren't even allowed to put their names in the credits of their own games because the companies were afraid they were going to get poached by other companies. That's why you have all these fucking stupid names that are in the credits of NES and SNES games. So there's like definitely a different development culture and a different expectation there. And for all I know, someone working with Kojima since the Metal Gear days might just be honored to be part of the team. I have no clue.
And something that's funny, apparently I wasn't a fan of Death Stranding. Apparently, like I slandered the game so much. Norman Reedus actually blocked me on Twitter, and I
really wow.
Yeah, and I've never like followed Norman Reedus or searched for him on Twitter. I just came across something random, and I'm like, Norman Reedus blocked me, and I'm like, That like I don't even understand how I'm on his radar. I'm literally nobody. So and I'm not somebody who, who thinks I get brownie points because somebody big blocked me. I'm like, how did you even come across, any of my tweets? So I just found that funny. But yeah, I wasn't a fan of the game.
Yeah, some of these guys are very sensitive. I'm sensitive too. It's fine. But like it's funny. Death Stranding is a game I love, but it's also one of those games where I can understand a million different ways people wouldn't like it. It's like it's not hard for me to understand why someone doesn't like Death Stranding. It's not a game I'd even bother defending. It's just you either like it or you don't. It's not. Some people would say you get it or you don't. I think that's ridiculous. Like it's not about getting it. It's just you either like it or you don't. And I can see a lot of people hating Death Stranding and being totally reasonable in that.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back to Media Molecule. I think the only question I have is like, what the fuck is going on with them? Because I just don't understand. They seem to be like just the runt of the PlayStation litter with like everybody else is releasing games that matter to gamers, I would say, and on a consistent basis. But they made Dreams, which I consider Dreams to be like, I guess, a creation engine for gamers. But I don't think that's the PlayStation fans are the right demographic for that type of game. I think Dreams would actually do better on Switch, and even not that it could. I don't know if it could run on Switch, but hypothetically, I think it would probably do better on Switch with their audience or PC. I think that they should have focused on putting that on PC before a lot of games that they've put on there already. And I just don't understand what's happening. I understand like, okay, their games probably don't take that much to make, so maybe they're not at threat of being shut down or anything like that. But it's like they're just there existing. They're not contributing like other PlayStation studios are. And I've seen some people defend Dreams, but I'm like, come on, man. Nobody is playing Dreams. Nobody bought Dreams.
No one cares about Dreams. No one cares about Dreams. It's sad but true, and this is one of those situations where I wonder, what is the intention behind this? Like, what are you trying to prove or trying to carve out or do? And my whole thing is like, okay, I guess it's like Roblox kind of Minecraft-ish sort of shit. Maybe that's like one part of it. They want a piece of that. Maybe they want some sort of ability to create and publish games that people are playing, which I think would be the promise of Dreams, and they've never really activated their audience in that way. And then maybe there's like some sort of like more meta PlayStation Home style thing they want to do, where they want to make just where you can make and create and interact, a Second Life style thing maybe. But what I see with Media Molecule is just a complete waste of talent, and to the point where I think a lot of the talent's gone. I mean, it is gone. Half the founders are gone, and a lot of the people that worked on Little Big Planet and Tearaway are gone, long gone. And what they basically made was a sophisticated tool set, which I think is pretty cool. And see, this could have been such a powerful thing where it's like, imagine if they did this with Dreams. They were like, Dreams is free. And what we want you to do is we want you to like pitch your games to us. Make something really special, and we are going to make it happen and get it on the PSN, and not with Dreams. It's going to be available on the PSN. We're going to split the money and do all this kind of thing, like some sort of. You might remember during the PS3 and Vita era, there was a thing called Pub Fund where they were investing in studios and investing in games, like Guacamelee was one of them, and Axiom Verge was another one of them. But do something like that, but incubate it with your own hardware and make some sort of pipeline for people to kind of get these games in front of people and figure that out. But instead, they've created this thing that's totally useless, where very few people play it. You need to play everything on it. They don't do a great job of bringing attention to it, and it's so long in the tooth now that I feel like it's time for it to be done. And Media Molecule has been missed in terms of, I'm not a big Little Big Planet fan, but like Sackboy is an iconic character, and Little Big Planet's an iconic PS3 series. And Tearaway was just a little experiment. The reality is that it's been something like 12 and a half years since they've released anything outside of Tearaway.
Yeah.
And Dreams. And you'll remember too that, again, you got to read between the lines. When they announced Dreams was going to go into early access, I don't know if you remember this. They said it'll have a very limited, like you'll be able to limit access in a limited way. So get sign up and buy in or whatever. And then they just removed that because they realized no one was playing it, that they could welcome as many people as they wanted into it. And when you remember and read those things, you realize it's not going the way that they wanted it to go. But you know what I think a big thing is with Media Molecule? I think there's two things. Number one, it's probably not very, like you said, it's not, their headcount is small. There's probably 50 people there or something, and it's not very expensive to keep that studio open. The other thing is that they won a BAFTA, and that team like is headed by someone who won a BAFTA, and that's serious. And that probably makes them pretty permanent, I would imagine, in some sense. So there's probably no real sense of urgency to move on. But it's like I said, we need that creative pop, that out of left field sort of game. And I think that there was an attempt at that in with some other titles that have come in the past, but nothing quite like Media Molecule, and so they're missed. And I don't know what's going on with them. It's sad to see.
Yeah, because the only studio they have that's, I would say, making games similar to what Media Molecule has made is like Pixel Opus.
Right, and Concrete Genie was a very, 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 and that's what I was saying. I didn't want to insult them. That's why. But it's like they're kind of, but it's like it's an A version of the AAA attempt that you would expect out of a Media Molecule. But the question is like, who's even left? Why would you stay at Media Molecule all those years if you're a game designer?
Yeah.
Or an artist? Why would you even be there? You're gone. You're long gone. So I think Media Molecule is probably even a shell of what it was.
Yeah, because I wasn't a fan of Little Big Planet or Tearaway, but I still respected it because it was a game. I don't really look at Dreams as a game. And I think if you just came back and released a game, people would just be like, okay, we're okay with this. Just release games. It's really that simple.
Right. And I also think that like it's been so long that Media Molecule is releasing games into a very different PlayStation ecosystem than exists now. Little Big Planet didn't get quite the notice or attention it probably deserved or should have gotten because PS3 was in fucking dire straits in 2008, man. No one cared. Little Big Planet was something that like only hardcore PlayStation fans cared about. And when Little Big Planet 2 came out, it came out at a weird time and early in 2011, as I recall. And it was PS3 had turned the corner, but not quite yet. We haven't really seen Media Molecule work within this ecosystem that has greatly benefited other studios like Sucker Punch and even Bend, selling millions of copies of Days Gone. Like, just give them a chance. And I bet you they'd do something pretty cool. And I wonder like where that eagerness is there. And it's been so quiet, dude, that I do wonder, like, are they just going to come out with something? Like, just have something ready to go. Could be.
Yeah, we'll see. Gotta ask you about this, man. So you interviewed, I think his name is Hasan Kahraman.
Oh yeah, Hasan Kahraman. Yeah.
Developer of Abandon, whatever the hell Abandon is. And I think a lot of your audience just thinks that guy is full of shit. I don't know if I believe anything he said during that interview. And since then, we haven't heard anything about Abandon, I think. There's been no real development. Do you believe that this is even a game or believe anything he said?
Yeah, it's like I really don't believe most of what he said, but I find this situation so mysterious. Like it's undeniably weird. Like it's almost got an eerie quality to it. Like we're talking about a guy who, like, when you put his name into the translator, said like Kojima or something. There's like all this weird stuff, and I totally understand why people fell for it. And I don't really believe this notion that they were trying to dispel that connection, and that they only tried to dispel it when it got out of their control. And but what's weird about it too is that the so-called Abandoned experience is a one-of-a-kind app on PlayStation. It's never existed before or since. There's nothing like that. And you have to wonder how something like that was even created and how they got that through. He had a PlayStation blog post, which is a bigger deal now than it used to be because like they don't let a lot of people post on there anymore. It's not.
And it was at one of their shows.
Right. And so there's something about it where like it seems like someone was hoodwinked, or there wasn't something there because he was even contracting art from studios that are like renowned contract studios in Europe and elsewhere that do art for games. And so there's all these weird tethers to it. But I guess Occam's razor suggests that at the center of all of the weirdness is this dude. And this idea that he had some sort of game, I don't think was ever really materially true. And that's why I wanted to talk to him. And that's why I don't want to say I tried to blindside him, but I tried to just pepper questions into my interview to try to catch him off guard. Like when I asked him about PlayStation Neighborhood, which is a dev tool, like that he would definitely know about if he made games. I know I co-own a developer, so I know about it. And he kind of was cagey about it, and it was hard for me to tell, like, are you NDA'd or do you not know what the fuck I'm talking about? And I guess I'm not quite the right person to really prod someone. I don't want to be rude or call them in the question to their face. Maybe that's a little bit of cowardly thing too, but I'm just not trying to hurt someone, you know? But it is weird to feel like you're being lied to or that you're being misled. And I was surprised that he did the interview, but I was glad that he did. And I feel like it was some valuable insight into what was going on or not going on with his situation. But I thought it was very weird. And ultimately, yeah, I don't think that there was much there. But I want to know, like, how far did the hoodwinking go? Who lost money? Like, he wouldn't tell me, like, who invested in this? Like, where did the money come from? Somewhere out there, I feel like is someone very deeply embarrassed or something. I don't know.
Somebody got scammed.
And that's right. And but I don't want to say that for sure, because who the fuck knows? Like, it's entirely possible that Hasan Kahraman is completely on the up and up and totally honest, and just, that it's a fucking series of misfortunate or unfortunate events, and he's just the victim of it. Maybe. I don't see how that's possible, and I don't feel like he did himself any favors. Let's say that.
Okay. Well, I guess that's another one we got to wait for. But it might be vaporware.
Oh yeah, I don't think that. I mean, I would let go of that game. I don't think that game's. I don't think that's a thing. And I think they might have even had something. And I think when people realized it was just going to be an Unreal asset flip, which was obvious even from the little bit we saw, I was like, I think they realized they were just going to get lambasted for it. And again, I would love to know more about their connections to Sony and just how that plays in. The other mysterious thing is that on Hasan Kahraman's PSN, like, games played is a game that doesn't exist. And that was the weirdest part. That was what had me thinking. I'm like, what is this, a Kojima like meta game, like a AR thing? But it wasn't. I hate to say.
Okay. I want to talk about PlayStation trophies, difficulty, and accessibility. And this is, let me admit, this is a very first world problem that I'm about to complain about, right? But PlayStation first party has essentially, they have this like rule or mandate that they can't have difficulty trophies anymore. So all of those don't exist in their current games. I guess in the attempt to make games more accessible, we even know they announced that their version of an accessibility controller recently, which, you know, is all good and fine, right? To make, you know, their games more accessible, and they're even when they remaster or remake a game, they put in a lot more accessibility options, and they've been winning awards for it. But my issue is, do you really have to remove difficulty trophies to make it more accessible? I just don't know if that's necessary to do. Because listen, I'm a bit of a, you know, I like challenge. I always try to, beat games on the hardest difficulties. So I just don't feel like people like me, do you have to remove something and take something away from us to give I guess something to the community who are disabled? Because I think you're also selling them. I don't want to speak for them, but I think you're also selling them a little bit short if you think that they're not capable of beating these games on the hardest difficulty, especially since you have an accessibility controller coming out. So I just don't understand, why you had to do that to accommodate a certain community, especially since like PlayStation trophies, people take them a lot less serious now because of things, like this and how they've changed. So I just wanted to know your thoughts on them removing difficulty trophies.
Yeah, it's weird. Like it's funny, back in the day, first party and second party trophy lists were like, a lot of them were really different from each other. Like Uncharted, you had to beat those games on crushing difficulty and do all that, which meant beating the games twice. And The Last of Us, like you said, had online trophies for beating, factions with both of the sides, and gold trophies associated with that. And I think what happened over time was that they probably got really focused on the telemetry that the trophies were telling them and what gamers were saying, and I think just kind of narrowing it down and realizing what we need to do is have like an achievable platinum trophy. And I think that that's what they've really focused on, whether it was with Miles Morales, which was like the most unachievable in some sense because you had to beat it twice. But what I'm surprised about is just the way how easy it is to break first party trophies, and then it's not really breaking it because they're letting you do it. But in God of War Ragnarok, I just when I was getting the shit beat out of me by an optional boss, I just dropped it to easy and beat him, and then bumped it back up to the difficulty I was playing at, and that didn't. I got the platinum trophy in that, so I'm just as much of a problem, I think. And I think what they've realized is that there's no benefit to them making these things harder to get, that they should be making them easier to get. And that's unfortunate, but they're probably seeing really notable data saying that when they have an achievable platinum trophy, like think about Resistance 2, which was second party at the time, but that had a trophy for 10,000 online kills, I remember, which is like one of the most notorious trophies ever. And that probably materially put a lot of people off from even bothering. Like, well, I don't want to, especially during that era when trophies were really actually quite big. And so I think they look at that and say, like, well, we have to do the antithesis of that. We need to make it so that it's achievable and attainable and not maybe difficulty based. And I don't know if they're doing it if it has to do much with the Project Leonardo and the disabled community, as much as I think it has to do with just the wider community and what they're learning about trophy metrics. It reminds me at GDC years ago, there was a presentation given by a firm called EDAR, like a study firm, and they were saying that a game could sell 30 to 50,000 copies more if it had an easy achievement list. And so you look at things like that, and you become aware that it's a little, I don't want to say sinister, but it's a little more calculated than you would think, right? That they were like, well, we will sell 5% more copies if we just make the trophies easier. And I think that's what it comes down to, unfortunately. And I think it's unfortunate that they've let the trophy situation get so busted over the years. And I wish that they would do something to fix it, which I think they can do with like a weighting system and all of the rest. And they've already started locking down a lot of the games that are allowed to come to the PSN, which should have been done years ago. So and I know they're trying to rectify it with PlayStation Stars in some way, but it's a shame because trophies are awesome. It's a really great system and a nice evolution of the Xbox achievement system. And I love trophies. I still go after them every day.
Because I always thought, like, especially in the, with what happened with Elden Ring, and the platinum rate for Elden Ring doesn't even fucking make sense. It's like at 40, 50% for the type of game it is.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, that it doesn't let you pick the difficulty. You just have to, figure it out. And that has a platinum rate that high. That's crazy. So I think it points to the fact that I think you need to give gamers a little bit more credit that they're able to handle these difficulties. And I don't know why they didn't consider maybe putting the difficulty, maybe beating it on the hardest difficulty in a separate trophy, like how they do New Game Plus. I'm like, I don't know why they didn't just do that also.
Yeah, I wish that those like sub trophies that come out would come out sooner, because by the time they come out, I'm done with the game. I understand why they do it, because they want you to come back and revisit it and hit those people that are coming back with the new patches and all of that. But yeah, it's interesting to think that I know a lot of people think that these things don't matter, but I can tell you're the same as me, where it's like it does matter to me. I do want like a good trophy fidelity with the lists. I want them to be fair and fun. And we were equally enchanted by the Elden Ring platinum numbers on our show, because what it highlighted to me more than anything is just how bad at games I am. Like that I can't get anywhere in Elden Ring. I'm horrible at the game. I only beat a few bosses before I was like, I just don't even want to play this anymore. And then there are just millions of people completely stunting on me and beating it and platinuming. And I think that's so funny, and it just puts things into perspective for me.
Yeah. And what I think about is Neil Druckmann had made a statement. I think he was talking to Gene Park, when he pretty much said that what Elden Ring taught him was to trust the gamer more and to learn to not hold their hand as much, because Elden Ring has I think has a lot of gamers believing that they want every game to give them that type of freedom. Don't tell me anything. I don't think that's what y'all actually want. Elden Ring has y'all a bit fooled. I think if every game started doing that, people would be upset. It's good here and there, but if every game just tossed you into a world and gave you no instruction, I think that would be a problem. It just has its place. But do you think that because PlayStation games have had a reputation for this lately, Horizon, God of War, where I even though like I'm one of the people I love Horizon, I remember playing, and as soon as I got somewhere, Aloy told me exactly what to do. I'm like, what? I didn't even get to think about it, right? Similar things with God of War and its puzzles. So there seems to be, I don't know, a little bit of an effort from PlayStation first party to treat gamers like they're a little bit stupid, almost.
Yeah, I think this is the risk of focus testing. It's probably the same reason, like the trophy situation we were talking about, and Aloy and Kratos just giving away the puzzles. Like when they say that they didn't get that back in focus testing and that they didn't know that, I believe them. But I think that that's what happens when you make your own game, so you become very accustomed to it. So it requires you to have other people play it, and you study those other people playing it. But then I think you become married to those people's perspectives. And that's not a holistic perspective, obviously, because they learned a huge lesson that their playtesters, which were extensive, missed, which is that you're ruining the puzzles for us.
Mm-hmm.
And you're never going to think about that, I think, when you're a developer, because you know the solution to the puzzle. So you're not even thinking about it as someone who's apart from it. But then I think when you're in a playtest situation, you almost feel a certain amount of pressure where when Aloy is telling you what to do, or that could even be engineered because someone from Guerrilla is watching and being like, this is taking 30 seconds to figure this out. Let's just tell her what to do. And so they make a little note and they patch that in the alpha build or whatever, and they get it going, and then people just forget that it was ever different. My problem with Elden Ring, I didn't have it's not even a problem. I think Elden Ring is a really cool game. I'm bad at it. I'm not good at it. So I loved the obtuseness and the kind of like the mystery of it. I thought it was very, very cool. I'm just bad at it. So that was what turned me off from it, is I just couldn't play it very well. But it reminded me a lot of like my experiences with a game like Fallout, where there's just it gives you a lot less than that, but like you walk out of the vault in Fallout 3 and you get a radio signal, but otherwise there's just kind of a wasteland, a literal wasteland for you to explore. And that level of obscurity, I think, is very welcome, but I just don't think we should always have that, because as I said, and I think you agree, like I think Forbidden West is a really miraculously good game. Like I think that game is fun to play. It's the characters are interesting. Like I said, the story's interesting. I think it's incredibly underrated. And that's very much the kind of game people make fun of when they circulate the screenshot with all the HUD stuff on it telling you what to do. But I'm like, shit, I like that too. So I think the beauty of games is we can have it all. But I think Elden Ring's success was very interesting about what that told us about people, about how hardcore some people are. And I think so. I think you're right on in cluing into that.
Yeah. Be interesting to see what future Souls games do, because you would think that the success of Elden Ring means it's going to spread out to other Souls games, but I'm not sure. It should. I'm not sure though. This could have been, I don't want to say a one-off, but Elden Ring seemed to capture people in a way that, like, if their next, well, they're working on what is it, Mech Warrior or whatever it is, but like if their next Souls game, if they make another Souls game and it's not called Elden Ring, are everybody who bought this game in droves, are they going to make that connection? I just wonder.
Yeah, I think I was surprised that they were doing an expansion, because I was like, I feel like your best option right now is to just go right into developing the next game, making a direct sequel, which I think they will do. But what's so funny is that FromSoft has just created this ecosystem where they're just doing a bunch of different games that have a little bit of a different flavor. They have a lot of imitators out there too, and some people that do really good ones like Team Ninja. And they've carved out this whole new ecosystem of just these mega hard games, and I think that's really cool. I want to see Elden Ring represented more in terms of its obtuseness, but I agree. I also in that we want curated experiences too. We were talking about that earlier on a show that we did on Sacred Symbols, where I was saying, don't be afraid, developers, to tell me the ending you want to tell me. I don't need a choice. It's okay. Like I'm playing your game, and I want people to not shy away from that either. So I get a little discouraged when I hear a Neil Druckmann, for instance, say, it told me to trust the player a little bit more. I'm like, you made a couple of masterpieces. I don't think you need to be. I appreciate that you're the musician that keeps learning. That's really awesome, but don't get carried away. Like your attention to curation, to beat production per square inch every moment. Think about The Last of Us Part 2 and how immaculate that game is. That's not, you can't have those moments in a game like Elden Ring. That's not to say Elden Ring is worse or better. They're different. So I want to make sure that everyone's kind of not staying in their lane, but understanding what people want from them. And I want from Neil Druckmann linear, like story driven, emotional, impactful games.
Mm-hmm.
And don't trust the player too much. No offense to, a guy like Miyazaki, but they don't have the writing chops that Naughty Dog does, and so I think you have to trust the player a little bit more. Does anyone care what Dark Souls is about or what Bloodborne is about? I think they care about the gameplay and the ethos and being in that world. So lean into that. So yeah, I like that they're working off of each other and being inspired, but don't get too far. Don't let the apple fall too far from the tree, because there's only so many of these games we're gonna get. We're only gonna get so many Druckmann games. Naughty Dog's only gonna make so many games. So I don't want any waste, like any foul, foul balls or anything like that.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, I said they're working on Mech Warriors Armored Core. I don't want people.
Oh yeah,
to kill
Armored
me.
Core 6, I think it is. Yeah.
I don't want people to kill me for that later. Also, there's going to be a lot of people that say they definitely care about the lore of Dark Souls and Bloodborne. There's people who swear they know the whole story. So
I'm sure. I mean, I know. I mean, I think actually my co-host on Sacred Symbols, Dustin, is one of those guys that kind of gets into it. But generally speaking, I think we know what we buy into these games for and what the hallmarks of those games are. I still think I would still take a Last of Us over an Elden Ring any day of the week.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. Okay. I want to ask you about Jason Schreier, and I'm not asking this to be messy. I've had Jason on my podcast like 2 or 3 times, and I've heard you say you respect his work, but you don't necessarily like him. Is that is there?
That's accurate.
I'm just curious. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, I think that there's like a group of people in the games industry and in other entertainment venues and in other verticals of life that are overtly I think they go out of their way to alienate people. I don't think they really care about how they talk to or treat some people. I think they mischaracterize people and have political agendas and kind of feed into that. And I think Jason Schreier is a great working games journalist. I mean, at the end of the day, I like his work, and we cite his work when we talk about it on the show openly. I also think like his work really is mostly games being leaked, which is cool. I mean, people like that, and I leak games too, and it's totally a worthy thing. And then he has his books that he writes as well, which I think are very well respected and awesome. So I want to give him his props and like for all the work he does. But I think that he's like I look at Jason Schreier as like one of the many political actors in the industry that seek to divide, that seek to defame people, that have no respect for major subsects of players, and it just doesn't vibe with me. And what's unfortunate is that like I was personal friends with Jason. I knew Jason in person. I mean, and had him on my shows back in the day and did podcasts with him and had a lot of respect for him. But I think he, like many people, I think that like the Trump era broke a lot of people's brains, and he is one of the people. And that's just the way I feel about him. I mean, to each their own. I'm not trying to disrespect him as a person, but that's he's had no problem disrespecting me as a person, but I'm not trying to repay it in kind. I'm just kind of speaking from the heart.
Because I found it so interesting that I guess you weren't fond of him. You didn't like him because you're both from New York. I'm from New York, and us as New Yorkers, we get that type of like narrative, or reaction from people, because I think like New Yorkers can be very blunt and I guess very forward and brash. I think that's just how we are. That's how I am on Twitter, right? I say how I feel. I don't care. I don't care if it bothers you or not. And people don't like that, and people don't understand why I'm that way. And I look and I see Jason is that way, and I know a lot of people don't like you, right? Because I think you're very blunt, and you say your opinion. You don't care, if it bothers anybody. You're not trying to like offend anybody, but you just say what you want. And I honestly do think that's somewhat of a New York type thing. So I just found that, because I just found that interesting, because I kind of see you and Jason very similar in that way. So I was like, they're kind of have similar characteristics.
We're similar in a way, but I think I'm not trying to alienate anyone. I'm not trying to defame or talk down to anyone over political things or people they voted for. I think these are very different things.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
I think we can be loud and proud and annoying about PlayStation or video games or whatever. I don't care what anyone does. It's up to you. But that's not what I'm talking about with Jason.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I think everyone that gives an honest read to not only his Twitter account or his social media presence over the years, but also many other people, it is what it is. And I just don't want to be a part of it. They don't like me and I don't like them. And that's totally fine. But it is a matter of, I think, open-mindedness. And I think I've grown and become prominent in, I guess, in the PlayStation space and in the crowdfunding space, because I've tried to remain very open-minded with people and try not to have those political litmus tests. I don't know how someone from a conservative point of view could ever read these people knowing that they hate you. They literally hate you. So that's not the way I feel about liberals and people and anyone, really. I don't hate anyone. So it's so I just feel like when you're disrespected to that level, I think it's different than saying, talking about games. I think it's a level deeper than that, or talking about the Jets, or talking about whatever. And I think that's obvious. And so I do take umbrage with that. And I think, it's wrong. I just think it's fucked up. So yeah, it's not nothing personal. I know a lot of people that are friends with Jason, and that's great. I don't. That's great. It's just I don't like him.
Yeah. And I've never actually seen his politics. I guess I just only pay attention to his gaming tweets. So I've never really. Or I guess I don't remember his politics during that time. But I definitely know a lot of people don't like him because he does block a lot of people, right? He's very liberal with the block button, and which I don't knock. I mean, I block people a lot, and but I looked at it as somebody who's very blunt, and I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, Jason blocked me for no reason." I'm like, did he? Because I'm somebody who definitely, says things, and I don't care how you feel, and he's never, had a reason to block me. I do think he's an offender of being a little bit sensitive and taking things the wrong way occasionally when people say things to him. But yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. I'll say that.
Yeah, I think I personally look at the thing is that I don't. Jason Schreier can exist and do whatever he wants. I mean, I'm not trying to stop him.
Yeah.
It's like I think sometimes people just don't get along or don't see eye to eye or don't like each other, and that's totally fine. But the thing that disappoints me, I think, in the whole premise with my disagreements with a lot of people is just the nature of it. Like that we actually did get along at one time. That the only thing that changed was them. And that's because I've always been the same. I just feel like I've always been the same. I've always been the same person. I think that's why I've had fans for so many years that just follow me through all these different things, is because it's kind of a consistent product. So it's not that I'm out here trying to defame Jason, person like Jason, or saying he doesn't have the right to feel a certain way, doesn't have the right to say what he says. He can do whatever he wants. It's just that we don't have to see eye to eye either. And the space is big enough for both of us. And obviously, we do different things too. So. He's really very much in the buttoned up news part of the industry. And I think he's one of the very best in that. And I think it's Jason Schreier and it's Video Games Chronicle. I mean, who else is even breaking news? So you have to give Jason his flowers for that. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And as a professional, I have the utmost respect for Jason, which is why we never try to short shrift him on credit when we cite him and cite Bloomberg, which we do on the show very often.
Okay. All right. Yeah, cool. Want to touch on PlayStation movies and TV shows. Well, specifically the TV shows. We know they're working on, there is Gran Turismo supposed to come out later this year. Uncharted movie already dropped. Last of Us is happening right now. And in the works is supposed to be God of War and Horizon. I don't understand how this could possibly, because I think they're supposed to be live action. I don't know how this works.
So.
I don't know how this works in live action. It would take a ton of CGI, and I think it looks weird no matter how you do it. I just can't see God of War in Kratos TV show without it being like severely like nerfed and like, just kind of take away that the real essence of God of War and everything Kratos does. I feel like it's going to be very grounded, a very grounded version of the IP. And I just don't know why they don't animate it. They don't have anything animated right now. So why not make Horizon and God of War your animated series.
Yeah, you're speaking my brother's language, especially. He would definitely agree with you, and that we need more animated works. And my whole thing with PlayStation Studios is or PlayStation Productions is I haven't really been a firm believer in much of what they've been pitching, whether it's been the Uncharted movie, which I actually thought was pretty good. I mean, at least unoffensive, I thought. It's not like I need to see it again or anything, but or you have something like The Last of Us, which HBO is awesome, but I think has kind of surpassed a lot of people's expectations. And I think it's pretty great. I think it's a bar below the very best TV, but I think it's a really great TV show. And so I'm trying to remain open-minded to the different things that they're going to present. But what I'm afraid of is two things. Like the first is oversaturation. It's what we were saying about Horizon earlier. How much Horizon do you think I really want? I don't think Horizon's that good. I don't think anything's that good. I don't think The Last of Us is that good. I don't think God of War is that good. I don't want too much of a good thing. And I think with the MMO and the multiplayer game and Horizon 3 is going to be a thing, obviously. And so all these and so now a Horizon TV show, I think that it's getting very Disney, and it's what turns me off to Star Wars. It's like why I just refuse. I'm just totally tuned out to Star Wars. I don't care how good any of the stuff it is. I'm like, I'm done. It's endless. It's just endless Star Wars. And are we really going to get that with all of these different products? I think that they have to be careful about why they're doing certain things and making sure that things exist for a reason. And overexposure is a real problem. And so that's one major component of it, is just this I don't know, this notion of aren't there new ideas, and do we have to wring the blood out of every stone like this? So I'm concerned about it from that perspective. And then I'm also just concerned about why, like, can everything be good? They've kind of used some of their good chips, right? Everyone has a miss. Everyone kind of fucks up. What's it going to be? Is it going to be the Gran Turismo movie? Is it going to be this Twisted Metal show on Peacock? Is it going to be, like you said, God of War Horizon, Ghost of Tsushima film? Or is it all going to be really rock solid? Maybe. But I just think that I don't think PlayStation demands this much attention, if I'm being perfectly honest. And by the way, it's just kind of craven if you're not trying to feed the games beast, which is what PlayStation really is. Don't lose sight of that. I think that the lack of branding on The Last of Us on HBO is actually ridiculous and a mistake. And I know that they didn't want people to be like, oh, and turn it off. But you should embrace that you're a video game, and video games are better. TV shows and movies are lucky to have access to the breadth of storytelling that video games have. And so pick and choose, I think, is really important. But I'm trying to remain open-minded because they've delivered so far, and the games are also really good. So, until they really fuck up, which they will at some point, then we'll hold their feet to the fire.
Do you think, and this, I guess this is specific to The Last of Us, do you think, or how important is it to you that actors look like the video game counterparts that they're playing? Like, specifically referring to, Bella Ramsey as Ellie and Pedro Pascal as Joel and everybody else in the show. Because to me, it is important. I think I like Pedro as Joel more than I like Bella Ramsey as Ellie. I think she's still a young actor, still getting there. And I say it very, straightforwardly. Her looks are jarring to me when I look at Ellie, and when I look at Bella Ramsey, I don't see Ellie. There are parts of the show where I'm like, okay, she channeled Ellie right here. She definitely did that. But it's still jarring, even with some of the other characters. I'm like, you don't, it kind of breaks the immersion. So to me, being able to act the part is just as important as looking the part. Some people disagree. That's one of the things that, me and like my people in my Discord and podcast members argue about all the time. But I think that just helps, the immersion.
Yeah, I think like with all, well, first of all, let's deal with Bella Ramsey. Like, I think the problem with her casting, if there is one, is because I like her, and I actually think she really sounds a lot like Ellie, which is interesting, especially because she's British. So she really does a great job, I think, with the voice and the intonation, but she's not meek enough for me. But one of the things that made Ellie compelling and what made it so scary was that she was kind of like this meek, meager little girl. And I don't know if you remember they even aged her up a little bit in some of the concept art. Like she was younger, like earlier on. And I think that was when people were complaining that she looked like Ellen Page specifically. And so they kind of changed that around. I remember Ellen Page herself complained about it actually. And so I think that like Bella Ramsey, one thing she's missing is that like that meekness. Like I think Bella Ramsey looks like she could kick your ass, actually. And I get that vibe because I mean, look at her casting in Game of Thrones. If you watch that, I mean, she's Mormont is an awesome character. And like Lady Mormont, actually so much in demand that they wrote her back in. She wasn't even supposed to be in it again. And so I just see her as like this ass kicker, and she's got that real like that kind of attitude that you would expect out of someone a little bit bigger and almost older. And I think what kind of balanced out Ellie was, again, just the more childlike nature of her. That's why when she jumped at you with a butterfly knife and stabbed you in the neck, it was especially distressing, right? Like I don't think Bella Ramsey resembles someone that I think would do more of that, and losing that childlike wonder with Ellie, I think kind of handicaps the character a little bit, because that's what's so unsettling is that like this meager package in this post-apocalyptic world is capable of that. And part of that is the look. But as far as like, casting people of different races, right? I don't give a shit about any of that. In fact, I thought it was like interesting. It's meaningless storytelling, but even having Sarah be what appeared to be part black,
biracial,
indicates that her right, exactly. Like maybe her mom was black, and I don't know. It's just interesting. I mean, I don't think it means much. The important thing with like diversity and all of these different things, like that component of casting, is that it just needs to be done for the right reasons. That's why I always thought it was cool that Ellie was always gay, but we didn't know that until Left Behind.
Right.
So like, if you had a problem with it, you loved Ellie up until this point, and this was already true for that Ellie. This situation had already happened. It was almost an interesting trap for a lot of people, I think, and that's why I knew it meant something, and why, like, even with like a trans character in the sequel and all of that, I'm like, this is fine because these people exist and you want to represent the real world as it exists. But when you're trying to pigeonhole things for reasons that just because you want to reach a quota or satisfy a certain group, that's not creativity. That's something else. But I don't think I see that here. That's my personal take.
Yeah, and I'm just a little concerned because because I think Bella Ramsey did say something that confirmed that she's not going to be recasted in the next season, which would cover The Last of Us Part 2. And I could somewhat accept her as young Ellie, but I don't know how you're going to convince me that she is Ellie when she gets older. Because I don't know, Ellie, I think I Googled that Ellie in part 2, she's like 5'8", 5'9". Bella Ramsey is like 5'6". And in part 2, Ellie looks bigger than she actually is. She carries herself like bigger and more threatening. And Bella Ramsey is, she's like 20, I think, in real life.
Yeah, I think she's about that, yeah.
She's not going to get any bigger, obviously, not going to get any taller. So I'm just like, I don't know how, and going up against somebody like Abby, in the game, you already saw like the difference between her and Ellie, how she hovered over Ellie and in size and structure. So I'm like, how are we gonna see that in the show and it not look completely ridiculous that this little girl is fighting what's supposed to be this like this monster of a woman? I just get concerned about that.
But you do make a good point, in my opinion, that Ellie presents in the second game like an adult, right? Like, so she's older, she's taller, she's broader, and still pales in comparison to Abby. I think like when we run into problems like this, though, at least for me, I've kind of come to embrace over this run of HBO episodes that this is just a parallel story. It's different. Like I just kind of come to accept that the inevitable part 3 and whatever happens in that game, and then the sequence of 1, 2, and 3, that's its own thing. And what's going to happen with HBO, who knows if they're going to get into some sort of George Martin style like situation where they have no content, and or who knows if the second season will even be what I hope it will be, which is an interstitial. Like, I would love the second season of the HBO show to be all new stuff because there's years between the first two games. So, so go ahead and explore that even for 1 or 2 seasons. I think that would be dope. But I've realized, like, with the way they changed the infected, with the way they changed cordyceps, with really the lack of the infected in the show, and just a bunch of other elements, it's just something else. And if so I try not to worry too much about it. Like, when people were talking about Bella Ramsey being recasted, I was like, I never even thought twice about her recasting her, because in my opinion, she actually, at least in terms of her, the way she looks, the way she presents, maybe not in terms of her stature, but her age, it's like that actually looks more like Ellie than the meeker Ellie that I'm looking for in the first game.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll see how it all works out. But as long as you embrace that it's something different, and I think that the show started much stronger than it's ended up, but I think it's really high quality, and I think Bella Ramsey's done a really great job. I understand why some people are concerned with the casting, but I think they pretty much nailed it. And I think you and I agree that they just nailed Joel. I mean, it's perfect.
Yeah,
in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah. Some people say he's a little bit. Pedro's Joel is a little bit more one-dimensional, monotone. He has shown a little bit of emotion, like when he laughs. The scenes when he laughs and stuff like that. But some people say Joel in the game show more range of emotion. But I think he's a good Joel.
Yeah, I just also think that what we're missing from the game is exposition. We don't know these characters in the show at all. And that's obviously one of the weaknesses that I think diminishes the show a little bit. Is I don't mind that they spent all that time with Bill and Frank, for instance. I think that episode was amazing. I don't mind all the different distractions in Kansas City and all of this, but it's presenting something different. The inherent value of a video game is seeing something from their perspective at all times, even when they're just walking, and the exposition and all the humor, like you say, the jokes and all the different things and the conversations and the movie poster and the scene in the mall and all like these are all moments that you're experiencing that are going to be pretty hard to represent in a show. The game is what, more than twice as long as the show really is going to be in terms of its length. So we're missing all of that context. Not all of that is gameplay. And so I think that that's like where things miss, and why I think that maybe the characters seem a little weaker generally, and why maybe everyone seems a little more one-dimensional, is because I don't think we know them. And we just got to know them so intimately in the game.
Yeah, I think my biggest criticism of the show is it feels a bit too, like the world seems too safe. Like The Last of Us, one of the biggest themes of The Last of Us, I believe, is violence, that they are in a violent world. But I don't really think that comes across enough in the show. I don't think they take advantage of the fact that, yeah, we're on HBO Max and we could, I think Neil said, yeah, we don't want gratuitous violence because because when it's shown, we want it to matter more. We want it to stand out, but we're up to episode 8, just happened yesterday, and it's like I still don't feel like they really took advantage of the violence and the action as much as they could have.
The world just seems more empty to me.
Yeah,
and I think we're seeing more of the world too. Like, we're seeing more of their travels in some sense, even though we're with them less. We see more broad strokes of like what the world looks like, and it seems like they're setting up a Last of Us that, like, you could almost explain the lack of infected by the fact that almost everyone's dead. It just seems like there are just way fewer people. Even in Jackson, which is kind of a tease from the second game, it seems much less populated. They talk about how they only have a few hundred of them, I think. And so it seems more like The Road or something like very Cormac McCarthy, where it's very empty and desolate. And I that is The Last of Us, but it's also not. There just seem to be more going on than that in the game. And I think the show has embraced much more of its like its doomsday ethos, and I think that's why it's just so empty. But it's just too bad that it wasn't longer. I mean, I think that 9 episodes is just not enough. I know
should have been 12.
You don't want to get 12. That's exactly right. I was going to say the same thing. I think 12 would have been really perfect, and you would have had more time to spend in Kansas City. You would have had more time to see the resort. You would have had more time to do all these different things and flesh some things out. Maybe even have some cold opens with the Fireflies. Maybe show us some things that we've never seen before. You've already shown us things from the second game, so show us some other stuff from the second game if you want. Or really get into this new stuff. But overall, I think they've done a really good job, and I'm glad that they've getting a second season, and I'm just very interested to see what it's going to be, if they're going to try to mimic the second game, or if they can give themselves a little space.
Okay, I got 2 more questions for you, then I'm gonna let you go.
Okay.
Square Enix, or Enix, whichever people prefer. I say Enix. So they've been skipping the Xbox platform, a lot of their games, not all of them. And there's been a lot of theories as to why. And a lot of people point to the fact that most of their games sell on Switch and PlayStation. So why bother on Xbox? But the way I'm looking at it is, okay, let's say your games don't sell that much on Xbox, which is the case, right? But doesn't even that little amount that you may make from your game being on Xbox justify and compensate to still put it on there? Like, like I assume it doesn't take that much more effort, time, and resources to put it on Xbox, and what you would make from it should still like justify doing it, right? I just don't see you losing anything from putting it on Xbox. Like I don't care either way, but I just try to get down to the why they're skipping it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like it's unclear like how much, especially with Square Enix, how much influence their partners are putting on them to keep their games only on their platforms. Like they're willing to work very much with only Nintendo or only PlayStation, and certainly with both of them. And sometimes Xbox gets included, and often PC and mobile are included. But I think part of the problem with the way Square Enix kind of approaches, think about well, are you excited about Final Fantasy 16?
I look forward to it.
So like I am too, and like I didn't want to talk about it if you weren't interested in it, but they say themselves, and who knows like how much this is PR and who knows how much of this is influenced by others, but like they've really benefited from not only keeping their games on one console, but kind of the streamlined nature of getting production help from Sony and all of those things. So certainly we can conceive of a reality where focusing on a single platform is easier. And then every platform that you add on is something more and more complicated. And I think they've probably done the calculus, or at least on some of these games, that it's not free to put the game on Xbox, right? Not only literally, but figuratively. Like there has to be people that work on it. You have to QA it. You have to. I would imagine that getting a game on. I know how much it costs to get a game on Xbox. It costs a lot. I mean, we put our games on Xbox. But if you're making a big game, like a bigger game, like let's say like a Valkyrie Elysium or something like that, that's probably hundreds of thousands of dollars, I would assume, to get that game over. And you would probably make that back, but I don't know that there's any guarantees that you would. And because it's like, who is anyone buying these games? How many copies of other games have you sold? How many copies of Square Enix games have sold in the past? And they're looking at all this data. And I just don't want people to think that it's like totally free, right on down to like ESRB rating it and stuff like that. Like you have to pay for all of that again, which is thousands of dollars. So I just think, and then they open themselves up to like this pipeline of support. They open themselves up to this pipeline of having to patch the game. I think there's just a lot of ramifications. And so I think they look at the sales and they just maybe don't think it's worth it. But that's like from an objective point of view, when you look at it like you have been and kind of seeing something a little off, and I think you're right, it seems like it could also be that the publishers are putting, or the hardware manufacturers are putting a little bit of pressure or applying pressure on them as well. But there's no doubt that Xbox games don't sell as well as PlayStation or Switch games from Square Enix's family. And that's probably true almost for any game that's released on those platforms. So Square Enix might just be cutting and going, but it could be a sign of something more too. I don't know for sure. But it's certainly conspicuous. They're not releasing, I don't think, almost anything on Xbox this year, which is like, I thought Crisis Core was like one of the random games that came out. Yeah. And you could see that they invested. I think that makes sense. But what's funny about it is it's a big advertisement for a PlayStation game. So that's what's even more strange about it. I don't know. But yeah. I feel bad for Xbox fans that are missing it, because I don't like, for instance, when Bethesda went, I was like, I don't really care. I mean, I like machine games and it is fine, but I don't really play those games. I don't really need them. I have a history with Fallout, but I don't really play those games anymore. And Activision is the same thing, although those games will be agnostic. But if for some reason Square Enix went and we lost those games, that would be disastrous for me as a gamer. Mm-hmm. And so I understand like some people really missing that publisher, because they're so essential to so many of us. So it would be cool. I would love for them to release everything on everything, and that's the ethos of my developer. We release all of our games on everything too. We're not beholden to anyone, but a lot of those times those deals happen behind the scenes, and so it would be interesting to know more about that.
Got it. Okay. Last question. So PlayStation has been putting games on PC, which I'm all for. I'm happy about that. And the games come out on PC 6 months to a year plus. Depends. It seems to depend on the game. Do you think there will be a time when it's day one on PC? People have talked about this. Where first party. I want to be specific. First party, like the story driven, because I think the multiplayer games that they're making will probably go to PC day one. But the first party, story games, will those go day one to PC ever? You think? And right now, is that time, that 6 months to a year, is that intentional, or is that just how long it's taking them right now because they have all these games, this backlog of games to put on PC? Is it intentional, or is it just like their situation right now?
It might probably a little bit of both. I mean, they're trying to acquiring studios like Nixus. I think was trying to like speed this up and get a process in place to get some of these games on PC. And I think you're totally right, by the way, that it's almost a given that the multiplayer, like games as a service, they would be stupid not to launch those games on PC. They must necessarily create massive fan bases of these games, get them everywhere. They should release those games on Xbox if Xbox would allow it too. Get those games in all corners. But I think God of War was a reminder to a lot of people. And it was a reminder to me too. It's like people still buy games. They'll buy games by the tens of millions if they're good. And they're of a high quality, and how much Sony made on that. And I think that's kind of the reminder you need, as we said earlier in the conversation, that they can have a little bit of both. And I think that they're going to have a little bit of both. But I think the difference between PC releases is the comfort level in releasing these single player games closer and closer to the launch. And I think that they would still prefer to sell these games on PlayStation, obviously, because they're making 100% of the money there, as opposed to 70% on Steam. And so that's just going to be a more valuable place to create consumers. And so I think you're going to want to bait them there as much as possible and not close that gap. But I think the more interesting stuff is how they're going to play with their games on PlayStation Plus, and if they're going to start to try to massage a more Game Pass light route for themselves to take. And I thought it was very interesting that Horizon Forbidden West joined PlayStation Plus Extra, because the game's a year old. And they clearly feel like they've extracted maximal value out of it and are using it as a draw to their subscription service. And so they see games in the value of games in different ways. And I think we have to pay attention to those things too. So it's not only PC, but I think it's also like how the games release on subscription services, how they're monetized, a lot of different things. But PC is essential. And as I said, those games as a service, I would love to see those games on Xbox. Like, I think that would be awesome. I think not with like factions or anything like that, but I think the things we don't know about. Imagine like a New Haven game, I don't know, or whatever experience. It's like, put that everywhere, see what happens. I mean, it's just like I want a bespoke version of Game Pass on PlayStation. I think that would be interesting. I think that both of these sides kind of have to accept their roles and their futures and like kind of the situations they've carved out for themselves. They could actually work with themselves a lot more symbiotically. It doesn't have to be this hostile,
Right.
But in the meantime, I think PC is a very safe place to launch those games, and they're seeing varying levels of success. Returnal didn't do very well, but games like Horizon and even Days Gone was huge on PC, and that's just free money for them. So I think that's the way, especially now that they have Nixes and other pipelines helping them out.
Yeah. I actually had a bet with somebody. I honestly thought like Returnal would do way better on PC, because PC gamers are like very, very weird like that, where, they're very selective about what type of games they like. I wasn't shocked at all that Uncharted didn't do well on PC. I knew that was going to happen. But Returnal, I think it may do better over time, though. I think so.
Yeah, I thought the mouse and keyboard would be very tempting for a lot of people. But I agree with you. I think it's like still a word of mouth thing. And we also have to remember Returnal was not a very big game on PlayStation 5. So it's not like, why is it going to be very big on PC? I mean, we're talking about a game that maybe has sold 1 million copies or something like that. It's not like, it's not like murdering. But it is one of the great games on the console, no doubt.
Yeah. All right, Colin. I appreciate this. You taking time out to just answer all my questions and come on my channel. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate the kindness. Thank you to the audience for listening as well, and I had a good time.
Yeah. Once again, shout out to Cog, Dustin, your fiance Micah, for making this happen. And yeah, that's it. We're gonna end it there. Chat, appreciate y'all coming through and listening and watching. And
yeah, sorry about my camera for the latecomers. I don't know why. I think it's because I'm using like an old version of Discord or something. But yeah, sorry. I don't usually look like this.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna end it there. Appreciate it once again, and yeah, Colin, we'll catch up. We'll catch up later. Maybe we'll do this again next year.
All right, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right. Bye. All right. Yeah. So hold on. Let me put myself back on camera real quick. Where is? What the hell? Boom. Boom. Oh, 1 second. All right. Fix myself real quick. I ain't gonna stay too long. I'm gonna just talk to y'all a little bit. All right, chat. So let me hear some thoughts. What did y'all think? Good interview. Okay. Okay. I appreciate that. Who's the last person I interviewed was the dude who gave Horizon that low score, and that was a fun interview. I really enjoyed doing that because so many people were like upset at him. I was like, I don't understand why y'all so mad at this man. So I interviewed him, and that was a great interview. And so I was actually going to interview Colin last year, right? Because I first reached out to I talked to Cognito last year, and I was like, yo, do you know how I can get in touch with Colin? And so he told me and everything like that. I went with I hit up Dustin and everything, and I was like, let me wait till like next year, right? Because I'm like, I want to talk to him about some fresh topics and see all the things that develop up until that point. And I'm glad I did that because I think I had way more things to talk about and way more relevant things to talk about, because I waited. Someone else who I plan to interview is actually, and he said he's down, is Gene Park from Washington Post. A lot of y'all probably know him. So me and him be chopping it up, talking in the DM sometimes. So yeah, I think I definitely got Gene has you blocked. If Gene blocks you, it's probably for a good reason. I don't know Gene to just be blocking people. But yeah, shout out to Colin for just coming through, and I think it went well. I actually thought I wouldn't have enough questions to go 2 hours. I didn't plan to go 2 hours. I think that was a little bit over 2 hours. But I'm like, whatever, whatever time this ends up at, it ends up at. But it ended up being the right amount of questions. I pretty much got all my questions off. I think there was one that the only thing I didn't ask him was about the Nebellion situation. I was going to ask him, do you think Nebellion is like the biggest bag fumbler ever? Because I stand strong. I can't believe that this man has 500,000 people following him and didn't turn it into money. I believe strongly. I don't care what you do. A wise man told me, if you got people following you, I don't care on what platform, you can make money from it. Because I've debated with like Jack about it. That Jack thinks like, oh, nobody would follow him to YouTube. Nobody would listen. Nobody would listen to him on YouTube. I disagree. Like I said, just by the rule of numbers, if you can get 10% of that. Oh, what's up, Gene? Gene is in the chat. I said if you could get 10% of people to follow you from Twitter, you can make money from that. Somebody who has 5K followers on Twitter, if they make a YouTube channel, you can get 5,000 people to follow you. You could to watch your videos. I mean, if you averaging 5,000 views per video is really good. I don't average 5. There's some of my videos that get 5,000, right? It's, my videos are up and down because there's a different amount of people who care about each type of video I make. But listen, I would love 5,000 views per video. If it was guaranteed, yeah, I'm taking that. That's great. So you mean to tell me he couldn't do that? I absolutely believe he could. Gene said, I'm with you on Rebellion. Dude had no patience. He quit after 1 month trying to make money. Yeah, it was just so odd. I just don't get that. And his Twitter is still there. He just has it. It's not like he closed it or anything like that. It's just inactive and locked. So he could always wait. I'm trying to find it. Is it not there anymore? Rebellion. The bell. Okay, yeah, it's still there. It's still there. Some people have unfollowed, so he has a few less followers now. But if this could be, see, the thing about it is, this could be great for him. The fact that he, made this grand closing. If he came back, he might be bigger than he was before. He could pull the Michael Jordan right now and just come back on Twitter and write, I'm back. Huge. He would be out of here. But it seemed that like his feelings were a little bit hurt because it seemed like he realized that people thought of him as nothing other than a gaming bullet point maker, which is nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with people seeing you as a Cliff Notes version of gaming news. That's a service you're providing to people. And you do it faster and better than anybody else. Don't they say, like, listen, if you could do something really well, you never do it for free? And even though he was doing that for free, he could have, transferred that into actual dollars. Anything you do really well, you have the potential to make money from it. So I just can't believe he's just leaving all those followers and doing nothing with it. I think that's nuts. Blandrew said there's no guarantee for YouTube. There's no guarantee, but he didn't even try. He made a Patreon, and the Patreon didn't do well. But what are people may not want to give you money directly, right? But they may want to pay you through views. They may want to pay you through supporting the content you make, even if it's you just getting on a mic and being, hey, this is what happened in gaming news. And maybe give a little bit of your opinion on it. People would still watch that. I would watch it. Yeah, there's plenty of people on YouTube who do news or gaming news, right? But a bunch of them still have viewers. It's not like, oh, that person is already doing it, I can't do it. No, there's space. There's space for a whole bunch of people to do it. So, yeah, I just thought that was crazy. Nabel unfollowed me after I spoke with Colin. That's weird. And we don't know anything about the guy, aside from, I guess he likes anime because I guess that's what that profile picture comes from. And that he was, I'm actually curious about how he was always so on top of gaming news. I'm really curious about, how do you do that? Like how sometimes before it's even announced, how do you get that news so quickly and put it into a bullet point? Like I don't know how you do that. that's, I don't know. That was amazing, but I don't know. Was there anything else I didn't get to ask him? I think I asked everything. Mm, yeah, the only other thing I was gonna ask him, should Sony San Diego make other games besides just, MLB? You know, I think it's kind of weird that PlayStation has a studio only dedicated to making baseball every year. I'm like, I'm not saying they should make another AAA game, because I don't think, I'm not sure how many what's their head count at Sony San Diego, but I feel like on the side they can definitely work on like a passion project or a double A game or something really small. That studio could definitely do that. So I just think it's really weird that they didn't do nothing else. They don't do anything. I think any studio that is dedicated to only doing one thing is somewhat, one annualized thing every year is somewhat of a waste. So, oh yeah, I mean that's what I talked about. Like, there's some people who, I mentioned that to Colin. There's some people who think like Colin is like, a horrible person, and of course they're entitled to think that. Um, which is why I brought up the Jason Schreier situation, because I felt like they're very similar. People hate there's a group of people that hate both of them. So yeah, I don't and I know things Colin has said and like his history, but I don't know. Like, I don't. Maybe I'm missing something, but I don't really see this symbol of hatred, I guess, that some people think that he is. And I disagree with a lot of stuff Colin says. Like, I watch his show, I know some of his political takes, and I disagree with a lot of stuff he says, but I've never heard anything that's like just inherently hateful. I don't know. Not that I try to I don't really try to pay attention that much to anybody's politics, but I see it in passing. But I am starving. I literally got home from work at like 6 o'clock. This interview was at 6:30. I didn't even get to eat, so I'm about to get out of here. And I appreciate all y'all coming through and watching. Shout out to Gene. We will be talking soon. We'll be interviewing you next, sir. I think we're planning for like the beginning of April. It definitely has to be after Resident Evil 4 comes out, because I got to talk to you about that. But yeah, I'll keep you updated in the DMs. I'm gonna get out of here for now. Appreciate y'all once again. Everybody, have a good night. We're out of here. Peace. Oh wait, I should read super chats, right? People did send. Okay, let me do that real quick. I don't want people to be mad because they did send super chats. Let me see if I could find them real quick. Okay. Super chats. Blaze 4K. What up, Blaze? He just said SOCOM. Liquid Data said, don't call it SOCOM, call it JSOC. Review Scientology USA says Sony needs to make a similar game to 8 Days /Getaway. The 8 Days game looks very intriguing. Sony sitting on the Getaway is crazy to me. Like, just that the story of the first, I never played Getaway Black Monday. I think that's what the sequel was called. Never played it. But the first Getaway was phenomenal. Like the setting, the acting, the story, that game was. It's funny because Getaway is one of those games that's kind of like you don't hear a lot of people bring it up you know, bring it up that often for how much of a good game it was. But the fact that they're just sitting on it and not doing nothing, like Getaway, if I'm not mistaken, I think Getaway was one of the first games of its type that like it didn't have like this HUD, right? It didn't. There was no health bar. That threw me completely the fuck off, right? Because most games during that time they have like health bars. That game had no health bar. It had I think it had the most limited HUD at that time. Right? It might have been I got to go back and look at the gameplay. Did it even show like your gun and how many shots you had in it? It might not have even showed that. And you heal in the game by leaning on a wall. Like that's how you healed. Like if you got shot up, you just lean on a wall and heal. I don't know why that was amazing to me. And that level, there was this level where you had to go through, you had to break into the police station and shoot your way out of a police station. I feel like a lot of games would have I feel like, you know, doing something like that now might get them. No, I mean, because I'm like, does Rockstar still does that type of shit. But I think Rockstar does it in a very animated and almost. I think Getaway is more gruesome than Rockstar. Rockstar just has, you know, it's kind of has like that aesthetic where it makes it look a little less harmless or a little less violent. Getaway was pretty goddamn violent and real. It felt really violent and real. So shooting your way through that police station, that level was nuts. That was nuts. And last super chat. What's your name? Little Trey 15 says, good interview. So that's all the super chats. Appreciate everybody for coming through once again. We're going to get out of here. Good night.